We'll open the meeting. I'm first trying my hand at chair here, so give me any tips you have as we go through here. But we'll open up with items of interest from commissioners.
Well, first of all, quorum wise, I'm leaving at 1:30 today. I'm going out of the state, so I did give a heads up. So I don't know if that affects us quorum wise or not. Okay.
Problem solved.
Yeah, I do have a question, and Chris and I have talked a bit about this as well. I've been reading several articles about this opportunity zone issue, and it sounds like some pretty significant potential impacts on affordable housing and other issues. And I'm just curious whether BPS is looking into this issue, which sounds a little controversial. I don't really understand it myself very clearly, but I'm just kind of curious what impact we may be seeing on affordable housing in the enterprise. Is it opportunity zone?
Yeah, it's the opportunity zone.
Just curious.
Yeah, Mike, we have not looked at that yet. And Chris and I and Andrea and I were just talking about it. And the critique of it so far, and the city actually did not propose itself, the way I understand it, opportunity zones. These came from the state. The critique of it is that it'll raise capital for investment in a part of town, and we've designated the state's designated the central city, and I think Gateway, and that's
the Pearl.
Pearl. Well, that's all the central city and someplace else.
Yeah.
No part of East Portland is in it.
Okay. So the impact could be a rush to. It makes development in the central city an attractive investment. Would that lead? But we haven't thought through. And that may not be the amount of tax benefit that flows back to the developer may be when you do the cost benefit of what you lose at state and federal taxes, not necessarily a great deal, especially for lower income households, which was the intent that the whole program was.
Right.
So that part of it is, I think, the approach that we've had so far, but we haven't looked into it, and I'll get with our economic team and folks at Prosper and just talk through the implications of it. As far as affordable housing goes, since we have inclusionary housing, the development of affordable housing, the development of residential units in the central city if this triggers more development than the market would never, without this tax benefit, undertake, it speeds up development in the central city. It could be, and I need to look at this, that because of its 10-year kind of benefit, it creates a building could create a risk for underdeveloping sites that we'd like to see developed more. But it's not clear to me now how that plays out. So we'll have to take a look at it, Mike.
Any other items of interest? Yes, Katie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was really interested in that too, because it looked like it was put in places that didn't necessarily need more investment, and could actually have an impact on, some of the things that we're trying so hard to do. We're trying not to have displacement happen, and we're trying to have affordable housing in the city of Portland. And it seemed like this initiative was, the way it was put in place, would not do that. Anyway, I'm just voicing an opinion. What I wanted to draw attention to is I gave everybody a letter, which the East Portland Action Plan had intended that the commission get, and then it was after the period in which what's that called, the when comment period, and so it makes sense to me that it would not have gone to you, but I felt like it was important that it do go to you, so I made copies and I have given it to you.
Okay. Daisy, did you have? Oh, sorry. Okay. I have two items. One is State level, Speaker Kotek has dropped a bill, HB 2001, which would require all cities over a certain size in the state to allow middle housing in their residential zones, subject to reasonable restrictions. And it got me thinking that no person in the state of Oregon, more than Morgan Tracy and staff around him, knows more what lies beneath those two words, reasonable restrictions, because that's what RIP's all about, I think. So we're getting a harbinger of things to come, I think, perhaps in the state, if this legislation goes through. And I had one idea talking with on a very different topic with a friend who's done a lot of work with carbon impacts, and just posing it as a potential presentation to the PSC to get an expert who can give us an idea of all the areas we dabble with as a commission, related to transportation, the built housing, the built world, recycling, straws. I mean, all those areas, order of magnitude, which ones have a bigger impact for reducing climate impacts. Because I know that they all have a role in it, but I have no idea what's more important, less important. So just as a toss out an idea, that if there's someone in the sustainability side of the Bureau who could lead that, or someone at DEQ who I know might be able to help.
You know, if I could just comment that we're have asked within the Bureau people who work with the carbon programs and estimating carbon impacts to sort of develop a curriculum, if you will, for us on which of our planning moves, the kind of things that we deliberate here, have the most impact. So as soon as that's ready, I'd bring it to the commission as well. I think it's an interesting, the sense of urgency around climate change is clear. Our work, by its nature, compact development and worrying about VNP is in sync with it. But I don't think we know the answer to which, if that was our primary objective, would it change what we're doing?
Yeah. Right. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I would hope that any kind of information that we'd be getting would also include the adaptation, the preparation side, and carbon sequestration. So it's not just about reduction of greenhouse gases, but how do we sequester and how do we adapt? So that should be part of the overall presentation.
Okay. Director's report?
Nothing for today.
Then let's bring up our bike parking crew. Oh, I'm sorry. We have. Thank you. Not on my cue sheet, but let's do it. So consent agenda is consideration of the minutes from January 22nd.
I move adoption of the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you for the reminder, Chris. Let's do the bike parking code update.
There we go. We're on. Good afternoon. My name's Sarah Figliotti with Portland Bureau of Transportation.
And I'm Liz Horman with the Portland Bureau of Transportation.
So just a reminder, we were here in front of you 2 weeks ago with a hearing on this project. The bike parking code update is looking to update the design standards and requirements for bike parking for new development as well as redevelopment. It's largely found in 33266 chapter, which covers auto parking, our transportation demand management, freight, and bike parking. Really quickly, just a reminder that what we're talking about are requirements for both short-term for visitor parking as well as our long-term secure parking for students, employees, tenants, and other folks who need to keep their bike for more than 4 hours in a secure space. And also that when we're talking about our bike parking requirements, we're talking about requirements that are typically required to be on site, and they are distinct from the PBOT installed bike racks in the sidewalks or in our bike corrals. And also finally that bike parking requirements go across all zones and then are determined by the various use categories. So today we are going to be going through 23 amendments. It is a lot to get through in the hour and a half that we have today. So we're going to try to be, at least here we'll try to be as succinct as possible. You have the staff worksheet in front of you. For the audience, there are a few copies in the back, and so we'll be following the order that's in front of you. The version that you have is slightly different than the version that you received on Friday. So it includes new amendments from Commissioner Schultz, minor tweaks from Commissioner Smith, as well as the staff responses. And so we'll begin.
Yeah, and I'll say that we don't need to, in fact, we probably won't vote on this today. Kat's not here, and she would like to be able to vote on the package. So as we go through here, if we have items that are pretty easy, we can designate those as future consent items. And for those that are taking more time, we can work through it. And if it looks like it's taking a lot of time, then we can sort of park it to get through as much of the list as we can and spend more time on it when we next meet. Yeah.
And Eli, I had an amendment that's based on that question that I had asked. The one about, have you thought about putting cameras on larger big box? So I'd like to form that into a amendment, if possible, maybe towards the end. Just
Okay.
wanted to give you a heads up on that
Great.
so we could plan on the time.
Good.
All right. Thanks. Let's get started.
All right, so topic one is bike valet. Commissioner Smith is proposing this amendment. It will allow the existing OHSU bike valet to count towards future code requirements. And then as the commission may recall that based on OHSU's testimony, they raised a number of reasons, including the spacing, location, lack of cover, that the existing bike valet at OHSU at the base of the tram wouldn't be able to count towards requirement. So the option one in front of you rectifies this. And
And I would propose this for consent list, unless there's an objection.
Any concerns or questions?
I have a question. I support this.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go first.
Go-
and
go
I'll
ahead,
Andrea.
No, you're first.
I thought you were looking at me. You'll get the hang of the eye contact
Thank you.
thing.
Yeah, I will.
And just sort of a question for the group and staff. Why wouldn't we also allow any other entity in the future to use valet parking in lieu of other long-term requirements? Is that a reason not to do that? Chris, you proposed the amendment. Is there a reason?
Yeah.
I mean, I realize we're doing it for OHSU because they made this specific act.
Right. I think the staff can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the unique aspect of this is the fact that being underneath the tram, they are not allowed to put a cover over the parking. So the big allowance we're giving them is to waive the cover. So I think you could get to valet parking through an adjustment process and an agreement with the city in other locations. And if there's not a reason you physically can't have a cover, long-term bike parking should have a cover. So the cover, lack of cover is the big exception here.
So if someone wants to propose valet parking without a cover in the future, there's an adjustment. We allow that as an adjustment.
So we'd allow future valet. So the other thing we've seen is this valet is functioning as long-term bicycle parking. And again, as we'll discuss on a proposal later, the proposed draft says 100% of long-term. So again, that's for employees, residents, students, that should be covered bicycle parking because you're at your job or at a school for 6 to 8 hours. You're at your residence, you could be storing your bike there for days or weeks at a time. And so that long-term bicycle parking needs to be covered. But we do say through an adjustment modification process, if a valet situation comes up somewhere else, that could be considered through adjustment modification. But because our purpose statement designates that long-term should be weather protected, that's where the piece is here for the OHSU. And so allowing for uncovered.
Yeah. Andre? Thanks.
Just kind of a global question. I'm supportive of this, but it seems to limit size, and this is a growing area. So what happens in the future when you get more demand than you have spaces, and you have more you need more space? So what's their kind of future for that?
Mm-hmm. I think the challenge here is that the space that they're currently using, OHSU has recognized that 500 is where they're at capacity at that location. In conversations with OHSU, they can look at other locations to meet their requirements for future. But we recognize, and the reason that we've put the 500 cap here is that's what's feasible in this space under these conditions that are listed at code. Under code.
Okay.
Does that answer?
Okay. So if they need more demand, they need to put a cover on it somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments on this one? All right, let's go to the next. Number 2.
So this is also from Commissioner Smith. And this amendment, again, we heard from OHSU during testimony, is to remove the 110% bicycle parking requirement for South Waterfront. Staff went back and was looking through the South Waterfront Plan District, and in the commentary, there really wasn't much justification of why that 110%. And so staff really, we support this amendment for removing this requirement, especially in light of the fact that we are increasing amounts for all the use categories in this chapter.
Any more comments, Chris?
I propose it for consent.
Concerns or questions? Yeah.
So the 110% is to ensure there's enough bicycle parking, correct? And this neighborhood is going to get more affordable housing and things. So I'm concerned about the removal of it, because how do we meet the demand in the future if we're not kind of overbuilding for the diversity of the housing and the jobs and everything coming down to this district?
And so this was staff supported it when it was applied to our current code, where our current code amounts, and I think staff have expressed this a few times, that we don't feel like those amounts are actually appropriately matching the demand for those use categories. So when staff went through to update all of the amounts of required long-term and short-term in our table 266, we used city mode split goals, as well as square footage per employee to actually accurately capture what that demand and future demand would be on the use category. So we feel like our proposal for the medical uses and college uses in this area actually now match what that's going to be, and so that 100% isn't necessary to help bridge that gap, which is what it was kind of there to do originally.
We're still building housing there too. I mean, affordable housing in that area.
Yeah.
And that's...
Right.
Housing would trigger additional bike parking to go along with it, right? The question here is whether that is above and beyond, whether this regional area has a higher threshold than the rest of the city for housing.
Sorry, and one other piece I just wanted, which is in the table right here. So when these regulations apply, so in this 33-510-251, the regulations of this subsection apply to proposals that would add at least 100,000 square feet of non-residential floor area. So this 100% didn't apply to residential buildings.
No, I'm concerned about the cumulative effect of the residential and the non-residential in terms of total bicycle demand.
Mm-hmm. And I think what we're saying is that with the update of Table 266, so new projects at 100% of Table 266 should be accommodating that 25% mode split target goal. And as each new project comes in, it will be providing that bike parking capacity for those tenants or those employees as construction continues to move forward. And so we don't feel that, again, because we're basing our Standard A and Standard B on the pattern areas, having this area at a higher rate than all of the other ones just doesn't match the methodology that we've been working on, nor that the city has been working on in the pattern areas.
Okay.
Yeah. And in fact, if you look at the mode split goals for the central city, this district doesn't have the highest mode split goals. So if you're going to add an accelerator, there are other parts of the central city you should probably do first. So, trying to be fair.
That's why we assumed that the 110 was probably related to the fact that the table was so outdated, but we don't have that in writing. It wasn't in the commentary from when it was put forth.
Any other comments on that one? All right. The next one, RAC standards, 2 points of contact.
Okay, so Commissioner Smith's amendment responds to online testimony that suggested that the design standard that called for 2 points of contact might eliminate some vertical rack types that actually would work well. And the amendment also removes the language, the proposed language that has requirements that the frame support the bicycle in a stable position. So staff, we don't have a strong staff position. I think the piece that we would say is that when the language was initially put forward, we really were trying to eliminate bad horizontal racks. Again, these are wave and serpentine racks that don't have 2 points of contact. we also felt that it could apply to vertical racks because, again, to use a U-lock shackle lock, a U-lock, you want to be able to attach the lock to the bike frame. Thank you. The bike frame and to the front wheel to the rack. And so again, having those 2 points. Here are some photos to sort of demonstrate that we were wrong. And so again, we don't have a strong position there.
Right. And the concern in testimony that I shared was that the original language could actually exclude some good vertical wall racks that would give you the security concerns that you need. So we can both simplify the language and include a broader range of good racks. So I suggest this for consent as well.
And just to clarify, would you include Kat's suggestion to drop the
Yes.
the stable position?
Yep.
Okay. Any questions or concerns on that one?
I've got a comment. Again, I support it, but my larger concern, is that we're micromanaging how to manage and design bike racks, and the designs will inevitably change in the coming years. Different kinds of racks, different kinds of bikes, and I think I'm uncomfortable with telling builders, designers, architects today, this is what your racks much have to look like. As I said, when the industry is going to evolve, and we'll see something new that we didn't think of that will be contrary to the code, even though it'll look like a better idea. One solution I was thinking of is putting language in the adjustment section of the code. Right now, the adjustment section is very awkward. It's got a lot of criteria. It would not fit well if you want to. So what I'm anticipating in the future, someone comes in and says, hey, I got a great new idea for a bike rack. You read the code and go, oh, sorry, it doesn't work. I would want that person to be able to go through a streamlined adjustment process, which basically says something like adjustments for the design and placement and style of bike racks is a low bar. It's show us it's as good or better than current designs, period, and not have to meet these other sort of throwaway criteria in the adjustment code. I'll try to draft that after today, but because otherwise I think we're creating a problem in the future.
I think one comment on that is, as someone who doesn't like doing adjustments all the time, I appreciate that this code update says that, for example, there's a way to have spacing less than 24 inches apart, because that was a common adjustment everyone had to do. And I kind of like codes that are performance-based like this. And as a parallel, we have lots of performance-based codes on parking spaces for cars. But you have to have a certain angle, 45 degrees, certain depth, all that stuff, so an average car can get into it. So I don't. So I agree with you. The racks will change over time, and there will be need to have 2 points of contact. So I don't feel as. But we'll look for the amendment. Yeah.
There you go.
Other comments on this? Okay. All right. Let's. So I guess we're going to hold that as a possible consent subject to future back-to-rack amendment.
Well, no, I'm okay with.
Okay,
I'm not going to dive into the change. I'm just saying, and if
expedited,
I'd like some way when there's new designs, they're not going to be held hostage to a 5-year-old code.
Okay. Swan Island.
Okay. Awesome. Commissioner Smith proposed an amendment that would add Swan Island into the standard A geographic tier. So just as a quick reminder, this is our bicycle parking area map with standard A and standard B, and then I've circled the Swan Island area right there. Staff don't support this amendment to add Swan Island. The current tiers are based on already adopted pattern areas and our designated bicycle districts, and adding other areas without sort of the thorough review of mode split, and the pattern areas have designated mode split. It's just not an approach that's supported by staff at this time. But
I'd like to make the case for it.
Sure. So I agree with what staff said about the pattern areas as the sort of the origin of this map. We've already made one exception for Gateway, which is a bicycle district, so we've grafted that on to the pattern areas. The logic of this I actually heard from a community member at one of the outreach events that PBOC conducted, which is that we've focused in on the residential pattern areas, so the inner neighborhoods in the central city. But the logic for the employment areas is a little bit different. So the Rivers pattern area, which is the one Swan Island is in, is primarily employment based. There aren't not a lot of housing in those areas. So the question is, what's the employee mode split going to be? And I reviewed that with staff, and we talked about it. And We sort of settled on Swan Island as a special case because it is very close in. It's an area that in the past has had an active TMA that has encouraged alternatives to single occupancy vehicles, although the TMA is inactive at the moment. And it is going to be on the North Portland Greenway, which is a major off-street bike route that will go from North Portland to the central city through Swan Island. So it will have good connectivity. And in fact, PBOT's investing, I think, close to $2 million on Greeley in the next year or so to make part of that connection. So in terms of its proximity to the denser parts of the city and the particular place it sits in the bicycle network, it made sense to me that the higher standard would apply. I reached out through the former director of the TMA there, who contacted his contacts with the various employers. Daimler did provide a letter in support of the higher standard. Most of the other employers, frankly, said we don't have time to come up with a position. But the one piece of testimony from an employer that we have does support this. So I think it's good policy. I admit that it's had less process than the rest of the map.
Other comments?
So I'll move it and see if we have a second.
Okay, so I'll say one comment on it now that it's been seconded. When I first heard this, I thought, well, Columbia Corridor, that's a district, but it doesn't have the central proximity. It's got Marine Drive, but it doesn't have this much investment coming to it, and it's not as close in, so I would tend to support. Any other discussion items on this, Andre?
Well, I may support it. My concern is we have not given the employers down there really time to digest the impact and what this is. And so I'm a no, but if we have time to talk to them and get that, I don't know if the staff has time, given there'll
be time before council.
The trajectory of this proposal. Maybe it's something you can come back to through and add in later. But I'm supportive of the concept. I just concerned that employers all of a sudden are going to be in a position to have to do something they really didn't have any input on and offer any amendments to, when we've given other employers like a lot of time.
Okay. And just for my information, is there a way if we pass this amendment between now and council, that people might learn about it rather than just see the
Yeah,
protest?
definitely between now and council, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments?
Is there much bicycle parking now? I assume these are fairly old buildings, probably built with pre-bike requirements, or what's sort of there today?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of these are older pre-bike requirements. Chris probably has a little bit more from Daimler, but I know that they have done some extensive work to add quite a bit of additional employee bicycle parking because of the demand specifically from that, and that it wasn't provided before.
And Daimler did a new office building on the island for their engineers.
So that would have been current.
That would have been code immediately prior to this, yes. Right.
I can say as
so they're already responding to market demand, which is what we want. My concern would be you have an old building that just does not accommodate the new parking standards very well. They want to put a $200,000 roof on their warehouse, and boom, suddenly they've got to meet this highest standard of bike parking in an old building on an old site that it's going to be tough for them to do.
Well, our standard for warehouses is not very high, and
Okay.
I think the parking that would generate, you could build a cage in the parking lot with a roof over it and meet the demand. So I think it's probably more applicable where there's office development. And I'd say that the strategy of the Swan Island TMA, when it existed, was basically let's get the single occupancy vehicles out of the way so we have room for all the trucks. So this is really a freight facilitation strategy in some ways.
Yeah, I agree. We've done policymaker rides for many years, and I was really impressed with the TMA activity down there. I'm sorry to hear that it's inactive now, but they've really had an aggressive program there for cycling.
I've done lots of pickups of building materials down there, and there's a lot of warehouse space where it should be easily converted. A little corner somewhere for bike parking, I think. But it's a good point. Office
Guys
is
have
harder.
persuaded me. What can I say?
Any more comments before we take this to a vote? All right, all in favor, say aye. Or should we do go round?
We should call the roll.
Let's do a call the roll. I think that, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, is that items that are consent we can just sort of bundle and handle those when we get to the whole vote at the end. But if there's items where there's discussion, let's vote as we go.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Take the roll, please.
Backrack,
Yes.
Baugh,
No.
Bordalazzo,
Yes.
Hauk,
Yes.
Larcell, Quinones,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
St. Martin,
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes. All right, that passes. Thank you. Let's go to number 5. No, hold on.
5.
5.
Yeah, 5.
All right, we're talking about wholesale sales. This would be a change to Table 2666. Commissioner Smith is proposing an amendment to add a requirement for short-term bicycle parking as well as long-term bicycle parking for wholesale sales. This is currently not in the current table, so it would be a new use category line. And so it requires establishments such as cash and carry to provide employee and visitor bike parking. So you can see the proposal, the various proposals for Standard A and Standard B for long-term and short-term spaces. And generally, the BPS and PBOT staff do not have a strong position one way or the other on this.
So this came out of personal experience. As Sarah mentioned, there's a cash and carry in my neighborhood in Northwest, and for a while they were on a street where there were Staples on the street. And that was great, and they moved locations a couple years ago because a tall apartment building replaced their prior location. They built a new store. It had a bike rack. It was great, and then one day I was shopping there with my bike, and there was no bike rack anymore. So I complained to the management. They didn't do anything, so I filed the only zoning complaint I've ever filed in my life to complain that the bike rack had been removed. Apparently it had been damaged somehow. And the answer I got back from the very thorough staff at BDS was that this is warehouse sales. There is no requirement for bike parking. So I brought this up in the stakeholder process with Sarah and Liz, and one of my suggestions was that we simply have a minimum for all categories, that there'd be no exempt category. And they wisely pointed out that, there are things like radio antennas and other things that would probably be pretty silly to have to put a staple up on top of a mountain for a radio antenna. So they proposed that instead we just institute one for warehouse sales. So that is the origin of this, and they've done their mode share calculations and recommended the amount, and I'm quite happy with that. So
Backed off the antenna.
so I'd propose this for consent.
Any concerns or discussion on that one? Andre?
So warehouse sales. This is Costco, cash and carry, Home Depot.
There's a very fine line between the wholesale sales and just regular retail sales and services. So my understanding, and just gonna look at Phil really quick, that like Costco, like so membership based like Costco and even like a Lowe's and things like that are retail sales and sales, and wholesale sales is actually a very defined term, and I should have a definition up here somewhere for it, but that it is this middle ground there between retail sales and sales. Do you have the? Yeah.
So this is Phil Namany with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And just real quickly, wholesale sales generally means that you're selling to another business. So I'm not even sure what cash and carry's policy is, but some wholesale grocers, if you want to buy something there, you have to show some sort of reseller's license or something like that. If it's just a membership like a Costco, it's still retail sales and service. If it's a Buy Mart where you pay your $5 so you can shop there, it's still retail sales and service. So generally, if it's something that allows the general public to purchase things, it's retail.
Thank you.
Any concerns with that being a consent agenda? All right. Number 6, parks and open areas.
So this amendment comes from Commissioner Spivak and proposed to raise the minimum requirement of short-term visitor spaces at parks and open areas to 8 spaces. So that baseline 8 spaces, or and then maintaining the or per 1 per 2 acres. So this would be eight space minimum, 4 racks for parks and open areas, and staff are generally supportive of this amendment.
So I would propose this for consent. It was inspired by my neighborhood park, which has way more racks than the city would have required, and they get used routinely. So I think it's probably consistent with parks practice in new parks. So are there any concerns or discussion on this one? Yeah, Andre.
Is Parks okay with this?
Parks does have some reservations in the sense that they are concerned about small sites. And just the fact that their portfolio of parks is so varied, but we also recognize that we can continue to work with them. If there is something that comes up, we can address that before we go to council as well.
That does make me think. Isn't there a city park that's like this big?
Yes.
In the middle of the road, exactly.
Yes.
So we could. It would be a friendly amendment to exempt that park.
I guess I would like to see their concerns. I would not like to see this on the consent agenda. I'd like to see their concerns, and then we can address it later.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Are people okay just holding? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just had one other question, which is would it be the same for like trailheads? That does these minimum requirements for parks and open areas, would that also be trailheads? I guess and that wouldn't necessarily be Portland parks. That would be like Metro.
And so that kind of gets back to some of the concerns that we've been talking about staff, and we can also dig deeper and provide more information at the next meeting. But because parks and open areas is pretty broadly defined in our use categories chapter, that it might be worth we'll share that as well, and so it might be worth a discussion on sort of where we think these should apply. So staff will provide that information too.
It might be good to have at least a little bit of bike parking on trailheads, but.
Yeah, the ambiguity was a little bit of a concern of mine, and there continues to be issues related to where bikes are allowed on trails and where they're not allowed, and I think it's beneficial to have bike parking, particularly if it's a trailhead where bikes are not allowed, so people then go from there on foot. So I think it's an important issue. It would be useful to have a better understanding of what open areas meant, and I know parks. They're a $6.3 million deficit right now already, so I'm sure they're going to have those kinds of concerns. But I do think it's an important issue for us to address, and there ought to be more availability of parking at parks. I feel, but I think maybe a little more.
Yeah. Any other items we should get staff to? I've got one more thought. When I pitched this, I was thinking urban parks, but it's not really defined in the code, and recognize that open space applies to like cemeteries and stuff too. Right. So I guess if staff has concerns that this would apply in some use category that we're not thinking about right now, that'd be helpful as well.
Okay. And I assume this would be primarily triggered on renovations. I mean, we're not building a lot of new parks, so it's going to, again, now we're going to get into how much money are they spending, what does it trigger, so it may not be simply implemented.
Okay, thanks. Let's hold this one and come back to it next time. So number 7, schools.
All right. This amendment's proposed by Commissioner Smith. And so it would increase the amount of bicycle parking required, long-term bicycle parking for K through 12 schools. So those 3 specific use categories under schools. Option 1, which is outlined, Commissioner Smith is proposing doubling the amount of long-term bicycle parking for the K through 12 uses. For option 2, staff has provided a different methodology, which increases the amount of required parking for schools using 25% target mode split for standard A zones and 20% in standard B zones, and then 25% target for high schools in both zones. And so basically we are just applying our staff methodology that we've used for full table 266 and again providing another alternative in terms of increasing the amounts.
So my rationale here is that the prior proposals seemed low to me, and when I think about the ecosystem of how we're going to get to a 25% citywide mode share, schools are the feeder system, right? This is where we teach kids to bike. We make it a habit. We invest a lot of money in safe routes to schools, so it's a city budget priority. So it seems to me that the target for schools should be higher. I think 30% would be quite reasonable as a target. I appreciate once I challenged them, staff went back and did a different calculation, got to a little bit higher number. I could probably live with that, but I would still aspire to the higher target that I proposed, and I'm interested in my colleagues' input on this.
Is there a discussion on this from people?
I just have a, so this would go in for all the new schools that are, or as they triggered their remodeling new school building. Okay.
Yes.
And I have a question. Is this focused more on staff parking or kid parking, or a mixture of both?
It's for both. It's intended for both. And so the proposed design standards that we have, if you'll recall, actually allow that long-term bike parking for employees and students to be outside, because we recognize that accessibility need for parents either arriving with students or students arriving on their own. And so it has slightly different security and location standards than we would see for our other long-term standards. But yes, it is intended for both students and employees for their long-term parking.
And just because I haven't looked at this closely myself, for the outdoor uses in this category, I presume it needs to be covered? Does it need to be fenced and locked also?
No. So we're going to pull up the language because I'm not going to remember it exactly. You have it right there. But it needs to be 100% covered, and then within 200, where is it? Do you have it right there?
So for schools, it needs to be 100% covered and within 100 feet of the main entrance. But there is also a standard under our security saying for schools a minimum of 10% of required bicycle parking must be located in a restricted access room or enclosure or a bicycle locker. And that 10% was to get at staff, recognizing that staff, probably want that security. They've got their bikes. And so that 10% was to cover staff, but the additional 90% could be outside. It doesn't need to be an enclosure. It just needs to be covered and within 100 feet of the main entrance to provide that proximity and a little bit of security because of the sort of amount of activity that's happening in the main entrance.
Yes.
Just a quick clarification to staff. If I'm reading it correctly, I'm just trying to understand the difference between the two options. So let's take elementary school, 24 students per classroom on average. Mm-hmm. The difference between option 1 and option 2 is that if we do 8, that's 33% mode split versus 6 would be just about 25. Is that a good way to characterize?
Yeah, so for option 1, Commissioner Smith asked us to just double all of them, but yes, it would, you are correct doing that analysis. It would be about a little over 30%. That's what.
And I guess I'll follow Andre's stream of questioning. Has Portland Public Schools provided feedback on these options?
We did send them. We did talk to. Did we notify them?
Yeah, we met with them originally to talk through some of the issues that they face on their sites and for their projects. Again, the enclosure, especially for student parking, was a big concern, knowing that our long-term security requirements asked for that. And so had a meeting with them, talked about that. They were given various drafts throughout and kept notified throughout the process. We also worked very closely with our Safe Routes to School team because of the amount of time and energy that they put in and work with all the school districts in the area. So working with both of those groups to come to this proposal.
Okay. Any other discussion? I guess we can take this as a two-step vote. Should we go with the most aggressive one first?
Can I just ask
yes,
a follow-up question?
Please.
So they haven't, I know you've worked with them, but they haven't come back and said better 1, better 2, or back to the other one at all? Or they just kind of holding
Yeah, they have not responded to the additional information that we've been providing them throughout the process.
So they were notified of the amendment proposals?
Not of the amendment proposals. no.
Amendment,
Okay.
but of
Then
the changes to the proposed draft in terms of the security measures, we've reached out.
Then I would propose that we hold this till the next session and seek their input.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Don't want to surprise them, even though I want to give them more parking.
also the other school
The other districts as well.
yeah.
We did reach out to the other districts in the process, but
They all just have really different facilities, and I think it would be really good to get their feedback.
Right.
Okay, good point. Teresa, yeah.
One thing I would just say is that we really should look at following a methodology for it, whether it's a higher mode split for school or whatever, because I support having the spaces, but to just arbitrarily pick a doubled number just doesn't seem like a good modeling for what we're trying to do.
Tend to agree. I mean, as I was pointing out, I mean, 25 versus 33, it's really hard to what is just right. Feels a little arbitrary.
Okay, do you have enough clarity on? I mean, I guess I'll ask the question. If we're doubling, in concept, I like the idea that we would young students, try and get them up to 30% mode split, even if the rest of us old folks are maybe not quite getting there yet. Is that consistent with the doubling proposal, or is there a way to just translate that? If we say we want to target 25% or 30%, do we know how many spaces per classroom to hit?
so let me work with staff in our next meeting and see if I can come with a more policy-based rationale for my option one.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we'll bring this one back. Thank you. Let's go to number 8, office.
Great. So number 8, this is a amendment from Commissioner Bordalazzo to propose revising the office use requirements for long-term bicycle parking. So under the option 1, you can see he's proposing for standard A that the new amount be 1 bicycle parking space per 3,500 square feet. This is compared to what's in proposed code, which is 1 space per 1,800 square feet. And then standard B, 1 bicycle parking space per 5,000 square feet, compared to what's in proposed code, which is 1 space per 3,500 square feet. Staff don't support this amendment. The amounts that we included in the proposed draft were based on clear and already pretty conservative points like employee density, which we set at 350 square feet per employee, which again, given the data that we've gotten from BOMA and others, that was on the very high end for amount per employee. And then our lower target mode splits of 20% for standard A and 10% for standard B. So staff were pretty comfortable with what was in the proposed draft.
Okay, would you like to speak to this one?
Yeah, this is this amendment is really to try to respond to some of the testimony that asked to tweak the standards, some concerns about perhaps going too far, and I think the challenge here is to find the right tuning for fine-tune the standard for the use that's in question. And it's also based on my experience as a daily commuter in an office in downtown with a firm that has a pretty healthy kind of staffing and kind of on the young side in the architecture and design field, and kind of observations from the standards that I observe in our office as well as other offices. And I think we're right at the 1 to 3,500 as far as space is provided, and I think we may hit that in the summer, but not necessarily so much during the rest of the season. Appendix D shows evidence that the market is actually responding in a fairly elastic way to this request, especially obviously specifically talking about office here, with going well above code already. So there's evidence that at least for Class A offices, that's kind of a good, perhaps, business decision. My concern is perhaps that for non-Class A offices, we may be overburdening some of these office spaces, and perhaps creating space that doesn't get utilized. I would back that up also with the idea that office space is trending towards being more in an open office type of environment. So if and when in 10, 20 years we want to up the standard, in case of renovation or new office, it's relatively easy to retrofit, especially compared to a residential type of use where you have a lot more wall space that kind of makes it a little bit harder to do. So all that together, I would peg the standard A as a little bit above what the current the current mode split is, to leave a little bit of room to grow. And then also, in conclusion, if we go back to the Appendix D, this would basically put us kind of in the top third of peer cities without necessarily being on the very top of it.
Okay, thanks. Other comments on this one? Jeff?
Can you, what are the current standards? Current code standards? One per what?
It is
One every
per
10,000. So this would be basically, what I'm proposing is 3 times what the the current code is, as opposed to 5 times.
It's a pretty healthy adjustment.
Yeah, it's already so it's basically somewhere in between what BOMA was suggesting, 1 every 5,000, and what's in place now.
Other comments, Chris?
Well, I would oppose this amendment for the reason staff indicated, that, as I was reminded on my schools amendment, we have a methodology, and staff applied the methodology, and indeed that methodology is based on the 15% employee or commute mode split that we were considering in the TSP at the time this process was launched. Of course, the TSP, we landed on 25%. So I would say that there's at least an argument that this could be 40% higher and still be justified by policy. I agree that the central city has its own market dynamics, and it's producing bicycle parking as an amenity at higher levels than this, and that's great. But I'm worried about the office building and Gateway and other places throughout the city where we equally want bike commuting to be an option. And I think we need to plan not for this year's market, where these numbers might be quite sufficient, but for the market in 2030 and 2035, when the buildings being put up today are still going to be early in their useful life. So I heard the testimony, but I have a hard time treating this category differently than all the other categories that we're proposing here.
Andre?
So if I understand this, the 1,800 per 1,800 2 spaces or whatever per 1,800 square feet versus 35. The 1,800 was at 25% mode split, roughly.
20%.
20%. And so if we go to the 3,500, we're half that or less, a little less than half, so like 10%.
I don't think the numbers work that way.
Yeah, here. Sorry, I'm going to.
I think one thing to recall in terms of the current code, there was this comment that it is a big shift from what the current requirement is. The current code at 1 per 10,000 square feet only accommodates 3.5%. And I think so that's where we're currently at. 3.5% of employees would have bike parking.
So where
today.
would the 3,500 square feet be at? It's
10%.
It's about 10%.
10%.
It is 10%. So I guess the question is, we're asking housing to be at 25%. We're asking a lot of people to be at. Why are business people have to be less at the mode split? I'm just, where's the equality in saying, as a business person, you don't have to contribute to the environment as much as someone that's living in a house or doing a whole bunch of other things? I'm lost in the equity there.
That's a good question. I would qualify as, it made sense to me to have higher standards for residential, because you would have bicycles that probably aren't used every day. You have kids, you have multiple bikes, you have multiple people in the household, and not everybody commutes by bike. Whereas in an office situation, you're really relying on the daily commuters. And right now, I think we're pretty much at 7%. So the rationale here is to peg it above that 7%, give it some room to grow, so about 10. In a setting where it's relatively nothing is easy in this world, but it's a little easier to retrofit back in the day, and in a few years, it's becoming more and more acceptable to actually have bikes in the workspace. So it's a kind of an easier step to do, but not necessarily overburdening the construction and possibly hurting employment in the next foreseeable future with space that might not actually get used, when we know that 13% gap might not be used for quite a while.
I asked the question rhetorically a little bit because we have the business people live in houses and we're requiring 25%, and then if they can park their bike there, but they can't park their bike at home, why do you need the space in the residential? I mean, it just doesn't seem. You need equal amount of space almost if
Every
you're
trip
going to.
has two ends.
Yeah,
right.
At both ends, not just the house, but the residential, but at the office space, so they can come to work. Otherwise, why put it in the residential? Because there's no place for them to ride to.
Well, again, it depends, and I don't want to go back and forth with the same conversation.
I'm just saying, it just doesn't seem logical to me.
I thought Ben's argument was perfectly logical. At a house, you have a lot of people who are not going to commute to work.
Yeah.
They're going to go to school, they're going to go to the store, they're going to ride around the neighborhood. So it makes sense to have more bike parking at a house than it does with a smaller percentage that are commuting to work. I find that perfectly.
And that's why we're using a 15% average rate instead of a 25% average rate.
We heard 20%. 20%.
So it's 20 in standard A, 10 in standard B, averaging to 15.
So this also brings up a conversation.
Standard A is a much larger area for office. But
conversation that I had with staff is, I understand the purpose of this to really set ourselves up for the future and having some room to grow, but is there a way to update these standards as we move forward, as we see that we're getting close to the demand and the capacity, rather than necessarily having a long process that gets updated every 20 years? It seems like perhaps tweaking these standards on a more regular basis would be perhaps another way to look at it.
Might be a question for staff, for BPS.
It would be a good way to do it. We have a hard time keeping up with the frequency of updates on a lot of our important sort of baseline pieces of regulation. So,
and as we discussed at the hearing, we already have a large building stock that doesn't come close to this. Building a building that won't be adequate in 20 years, and we have no way to make up for that. Right.
So we have extra capacity in the new building, and we somehow need to figure out how to serve the underserved.
Let's just get additional comment from Teresa, and then I guess maybe on this one we can go to a motion if you'd like, and then if there's more discussion after that, we can have that part of the vote. Teresa, though, first.
I just had a question. Could you remind me, is work from home part of a mode split category, or like if you don't even show up there? Because it just seems to me that in terms of reducing commute and other things, is a very big push on the business side. Maybe it's
right, but you're not building a building for the people who work from home, right? The office building is for the people who do commute to work.
Okay. Well, let's go. Should we put an amendment on the floor? Would someone like to propose, or do we need to propose an amendment?
We're just trying to get a sense of the commission.
Yeah, we're getting a sense. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, would you like to put forth the proposal?
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to move forth with a proposal for option 1 to revise the amount of required long-term bicycle parking for office use in Table 266-6 to require 1 bicycle parking per 3,500 square feet for Standard A, and 1 bicycle parking space per 5,000 square feet of office space for Standard B.
Is there a second?
Informal second. Yes.
Well, it's either formal or not, right?
Well, we're not. I thought we said we're not taking binding votes.
No, we are.
Oh, we are. Yes.
With the consent, we're not. We're postponing the consent. We'll vote on them as a bundle, but the rest we're doing as votes.
So we're voting as we go, unless there's 2 categories. One consent, the other is more information from staff. Thanks. Okay, discussion. I'm going to put out there that I mean, actually, your comment about the open office trend made me think more people per square footage over time. And the Class A versus Class B got me thinking about affordable housing, how we need to have the same level of threshold, whether the market's driving the higher level of bike service or not. So I guess I'm inclined not to support it, but I'd like, are there other comments here? Katie?
Yeah, I guess this seems like it kind of goes to the heart of what is happening here. This is what this more bicycle parking is all about, is raising the standards and making it so that there isn't a choke point at any place. There's not a choke point when you get to work. You can't put your bike there. There's not a choke point at home and at transit. So to me, this kind of strikes at the heart of the whole thing. So I'm going to be voting against it.
Any other comments? Discussion? Then let's take a vote. Would you like to call the roll?
Backrack,
Yes.
Baugh,
No.
Bortolazzo,
Yes.
Hauk,
No.
Larcel,
No.
Quinones,
No.
Smith,
No.
St. Martin,
Yes.
Spivak.
No? Okay, I think that did not pass.
Did
Well,
not pass.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I'm sorry. It's for office parking, long-term requirements in the office doesn't count?
No, it can be, as long as it's in a restricted, in terms of location of where
Yeah.
the long-term bike
So
parking.
if it's like Ben's describing, we have an open office, you can bring your bike in, that doesn't count? It's got to be a designated in-office?
No,
As long as access to your floor, like if, I think, I'm going to get the name wrong, New Relic, I think might be the case of it. They're on the 20-something floor in Big Pink, so they have restricted access onto their floor. So it could be in right near the reception in that restricted, because it's got a locked door to get into their
have to have a
office
rack.
area.
Right.
And you have to have a rack.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we're in an office where people can just wheel their bike
Leaning your
into
bike
the-
against your desk doesn't
What?
count.
Doesn't count?
No.
Which is what a lot of offices have. But that doesn't count? Okay. Oh, well, we lost the vote on that one. So I won't propose a similar reduction in commercial and restaurants.
Let's go to number 9. And this was proposed by Commissioner Schultz, but if people feel comfortable summarizing it,
Essentially
take a
here,
stab.
what Commissioner Schultz is proposing is an amendment to specify in the language that the horizontal rack requirement for schools would only apply for the elementary school uses. And so I think some background here, staff's intention when we said that those requirements need to be horizontal, we were thinking about trying to protect the elementary, to some extent middle school users. We are perfectly, and it was just for code simplicity's sake, but we are supportive if that's...
Chris.
So Kat, in her note, asked for commissioners who had children to speak to their experience. So my daughter commuted by bicycle to high school as a freshman and a sophomore. She was just over 5 feet, and I think she had access to horizontal parking. I think she would have struggled to get the bike up onto a vertical wall rack.
I have a 5 and a 9-year-old, and I can't get the 5-year-old to ride yet. The 9-year-old does not use a vertical rack. That's 5th grade. I guess other comments on this, and I guess we could decide to vote on this, or if there's a concern that we should run this past Portland Public or the schools. I'm open to that question of whether we should circle back with them.
It gives them more options rather than less, so I don't.
They would.
Yeah, they were
This
they
would
were
give them more
aware
flexibility.
of the horizontal requirement, and so the one change here is that it would only be applying to K through 5, so they were aware of the horizontal requirement.
Thank you. All right. So I guess this could be proposed as consent. Is there any concerns with that?
Well, yeah, I'm opposed, so
Oh, you're
I don't
opposed,
want to put
okay.
it on consent. As I said, my daughter could not have used a vertical
All right.
rack, so
Get
if
it
we just need to get to a vote, I will move it as a courtesy for Kat, who's not here, but I will vote against it.
Okay.
You want to apply to all?
I want the parking at schools to be horizontal, as the current code says, rather than allowing vertical wall racks.
Thank you. I got that backwards on my read.
Yeah.
Then
And if nobody wants to second it, then we don't need to vote.
Yeah, I guess if is there a proposal for this one?
So again, as a courtesy to Kat, I'll make the motion, but if I am going to oppose it if we vote. If somebody wants to second it, then we can have a vote.
It seems to me that maybe we shouldn't take that route. If she wants to propose it next meeting, she can.
Okay.
And then that way we don't set something up to
Right.
make it die. Let's go on to number 10.
Great. So number 10, this proposal is to add design standards to in-unit bicycle parking. This was raised by a number of commissioners throughout both the briefing and the hearing. So staff have outlined two options. Under option 1, they would specify that the parking in-unit must be in a dedicated enclosed space, like a room or a closet that accommodates the standard spacing for the bike. Must have a rack. Must have a rack. It must be near the front door, and then that the rack cannot be removed. Option 2 specifies that the bicycle parking in a rack again should be within 15 feet of the main entrance of the dwelling unit, and again that the rack cannot be removed. I do, just because I know we've talked about it a few times, want to just show some examples because we've been asked for pictures of good and bad in-unit bicycle parking. So this is just some illustration of some very poorly done bicycle parking in dwelling units, where you can see racks that are placed in bedrooms. Even in this staged apartment, shows that the rack is over the couch, which cannot be accessed by someone that needs to park their bicycle. But there are also good examples, and this is from the Osprey apartments that are in South Waterfront. Again, you can see on the floor plan that the bicycle rack is within a storage room right near the front door of the apartment, and then this picture is just a picture looking into that storage room. So again, we've got these three options, with no change being the other one, and PBOT and BPS staff support adding design standards to ensure in-unit bicycle parking can be usable and done well, and the preference is for option 1. We do want to add that we don't necessarily support the addition of the rack cannot be removed, because this is adding unnecessary verbiage to the zoning code. A zoning code requirement implies permanence, and so if that bicycle parking rack, since it's required, is removed, that's a code violation. And so that language is just adding unnecessary language to the code. And then finally, I just want to mention again that our Bureau of Development Services staff have provided comments throughout this process, and that they have concerns about adding design standards to in-unit bicycle parking because of the time it may add to review and the complexity in the review process. So just wanted to surface that for folks.
So are they expressing that concern with either of these options?
Yeah.
Any other, would you like to comment?
Questions and comments. So I think we are going to look before very long about whether we're going to be having 20% in-unit allowance or 50% in-unit allowance. If we're aiming towards the higher number, to me that militates towards stronger standards to make sure that the parking is useful. We've seen lots of examples where without standards it's done badly. I think we also heard in testimony and outreach that there are many cases where the rack gets removed at tenant request, right? Have we ever done a zoning enforcement against one of those that you're aware of?
Not that we're aware of.
Right.
But,
So I appreciate the concern that the rack cannot be removed is implied by the code, but I like clear statements that the public can understand in the zoning code, which is why I asked that language be put in there. So I would lean strongly towards the stronger standard in option 1. And when it comes time, I'll make that motion. But I'll leave it open for discussion at the moment.
Further discussion or questions? Yeah, Teresa. And then Katie.
Go ahead.
Oops. About the rack cannot be removed, it just seems to be really harsh if you live in a small place and that you aren't using it for your bike. I mean, the building should support it, but if it's your space and you need it and that thing is in your way, it just seems harsh.
Well, the alternative is put the parking in a bike room and not have it infringe on tenant space. And it's the building managers who want this option. So,
So I wasn't. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
Katie?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I wasn't sure why you wanted one instead of two. Or did you care? It kind of it's sort of implied in there in your verbiage there.
Yeah, our staff preference was on one because that the language here, be provided in a room or closet of the dwelling unit that includes the rack and meets the spacing standards, as opposed to two. It could be a rack that meets the spacing standards, but could be within the hallway that doesn't have a designated space. And so staff liked having that storage room or closet, again, sort of like we see in this example, as opposed to could be along the entrance wall. Even though it meets the spacing standards, we felt like having that dedicated storage space and actually could get a little bit more towards, having a rack in that storage room. That room can be used for other things too, and that rack's not as invasive as if it wasn't in that dedicated
Right,
dedicated
like
room.
if it was in your living room and you wanted it taken out, that seems more reasonable than.
Right. I mean,
Okay.
you could put your kayak there instead of a bicycle and nobody's hurt, right?
Oh boy, yeah.
You have a comment?
Okay. So
Other
that was my.
comments? Thanks.
I'm amused at some point that we're mandating in these 4, 5, 6, 800 square foot apartments that the bike has to be near the front door. I can't wheel it 50 feet or so. That's. I mean, I'm going to be against this because I think we're getting into micromanaging at a level that's unnecessary. I also, my daughters are both past college age, but all through college, through young adulthood, I never visited a dorm room or apartment where young people were living where there wasn't a bike or two or three in the living room up against the kitchen. Yeah, it's not ideal, but if that's going to accommodate people's bikes, do we really need to mandate, we want better for you, we want a rack that's going to hang on, and we're going to design the rack and tell you where it's going to be? I think either apartment developers are going to want good in-unit bike parking because they see it as an amenity, or they're not. And I just don't think this is really going to make or break encouraging people to bike, whether or not they have an enclosed closet for their bike near the front door. Again, I think we're over micromanaging how to let the private sector and the private citizens do this sort of thing. So I'll be against managing it. Plus, I share BDS's concern. This means you're going to go in and have to, as part of your land use development review, you're showing where the bike is. I mean, is there something we can put in the building code? It might be easier to manage the implementation. So anyway.
Other comments? And I should say we'll take a couple more on this one now, but this may be one that we have to kick forward. We're at 20 minutes to wrapping up this session, and there may be anyway, but let's take two more right now while we're on the roll.
Ben was before me.
I think
Okay,
Chris was before
maybe
me.
and you let's go Ben then.
All right. Well, I'm support in making sure that the space is provided somewhere. I'm not so sure we need to have a dedicated space in a room. From an architect standpoint, it seems like that's a big ask. We heard a lot of concerns, especially on the affordable housing side. But I would say pretty much any type of housing would. It would be pretty big ask to do a room that's dedicated for it. I understand you can use it for other uses, but as long as the space is there and it's provided, I think that's the point. More than that, I think, is beyond the point.
Andre?
I'm supportive of this. The rack cannot be removed. I'm kind of with Teresa. If you want to remove the rack and put it by your dishwasher or sink or whatever in your bathroom, that's fine. I think the owner's responsibility is to ensure the new tenant has the rack there. So, but you as the user, people do a lot of things in their apartments. So I just say it. I'm concerned about it cannot be removed and somebody using it as a vehicle for saying you have to get out, you remove the rack.
Okay. Any other comments?
Eli, can I just make a quick comment from a
Please.
code writing standpoint? I just want to mention to people that we have 1,700 pages of code. we have hundreds of development standards. All of those development standards are required, and we don't necessarily place at the end of each development standard that you can't modify it. If you can't if you're modifying it and providing something else that meets the code, you can do that through our permit or review process. If you just remove it, I mean, if you take a tree out of a planting strip, if you make a driveway not as wide as it was supposed to be, all of those things become a code compliance issue. Bike parking is no different. So unless we want to start saying after every standard, put a condition of what makes it not compliant, I would suggest that being silent on here essentially does the same thing that Chris is hoping to get.
Chris?
So I'm not going to fall on my sword on that point, but what I do want to say is that, you know, again, I go back to the demographics. We have captured the strong and the fearless, the enthused and the confident. To make our 25% mode share goals, we have to get the interested but concerned. That means we have to make it easy and comfortable for them. And if they have to squeeze their bicycle into the bathroom, that's not easy and comfortable. So having the space where you can, you know, I still think most of them are going to prefer a bike room, but if the landlords really want the flexibility of putting it in the unit, then it should be easy to come in the front door and hang the bike. So I think it is important to have good design standards for the space in the unit if that's the way the developers and the building operators want to provide the parking. So.
Okay. Would you like to propose an amendment on this one?
Sure. So I will move option 1 without the language "the rack cannot be removed." I'll
Is there a
cede to staff on that point.
Okay, second from Katie. Discussion? Okay, let's roll call vote.
Okay, Backrack?
No.
Baugh?
Yes.
Bortolazzo?
No.
Larcel?
Yes.
Quinones?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
St. Martin? No. Spivak?
Yes?
It passes.
Close pass. Number 11. In-unit small site exception.
Okay, so this amendment, let's back up. So at the PSC hearing, this group appointed a small working group to address some of the small site issues. And so this is the first of 2 recommendations that are coming out of that group. The second is going to follow at number 14. So the options that you have in front of you. So the working group's proposal is that for sites up to 12 units, that 100% of the long-term bicycle parking can be provided in the dwelling unit. We just want to note staff here that actually, oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. Okay. Just really quickly, a note from staff is that because of accessibility standards, right, that for buildings with no elevators, the required bicycle parking would have to be located. So the required bicycle parking that would be in unit would have to be on the ground floor. And staff feel very strongly that we should not be approving recommendations where tenants would have to carry bikes upstairs. So just want to be clear in terms of that's where staff's position is.
Well, it sounds like we did just propose in-unit bicycle standards, and as part of the committee, I would ask whether this would be a consent item. Are there any concerns with that?
As part of the working group, I support it, though we did not discuss this the one issue at the working group about so we agreed for 5 to 12 units, smaller buildings. You could put all the bikes in unit. Too difficult, too expensive to have enclosed. But the question about elevators. So in other words, you have a small building, 1-story walk up. Now in other words, if it's a 1-story walk up, I believe that's okay. We're saying for smaller buildings, the difficulty and the expense of enclosed bike storage is too much. So you can put the bikes in your unit. Well, those buildings, those smaller buildings, typically don't have an elevator. So by saying Yes, but if you don't have an elevator, then you have to have ground floor storage. We sort of undermine the whole purpose of this, which is to say smaller buildings don't need the expensive storage unit. You can put the bike in the room. So my point being, I think this should apply across the board, whether there's an elevator or not. Yes, it'll mean in smaller apartment buildings that are 2 stories, you're going to have to walk your bike up, which may hurt some of the constituency you're after, Chris, but there's certainly a large constituency that has been walking bikes up 1 flight of stairs for a long, long time. So we didn't discuss this at the work group. You heard staff position.
Well, and the staff note is just saying that in the proposed draft right now, that under our section on in-unit bicycle parking, it has that buildings with no elevators, required long-term bicycle parking must be located on the ground floor unit. So we're trying to elevate that's in the proposed draft right now. And again,
okay, so you weren't offering an opinion on whether or not it should apply 5 to 12 units.
Staff think it should apply,
Sure, gotcha.
but also we're just noting that this wasn't something that staff put on after this working group. It was in the proposed draft.
Right, at the working group, we did not resolve or address this issue.
Thank you.
I think the point staff is making, if you wanted to affect that draft, it would be a different amendment to a different part of the code.
Okay, well.
So this amendment, just let me get it. This amendment is the 12 or less threshold,
right?
Where you could just meet your bike parking requirement 100% in the units or up to that, and that there would be a separate potential amendment to say that for smaller, it would be a separate smaller project amendment that would say that you can.
Well,
the
I guess
elevators
the
aren't
chair's
required.
indulgence, since we're now asking the commission if they're comfortable with allowing 100% in unit for 5 to 12. I propose we have the discussion now also. Does that apply to elevator or non-elevator buildings? Even though there's not an amendment, we could certainly.
Okay, Teresa?
So practically speaking, if this building has 6 units on the bottom and 6 on the top, how many long-term spaces do they need? And could they all be on the bottom, on the ground floor? Problem solved. Do they need more than 50% of the units to have parking?
Yes.
Yeah, you need 18.
Yes.
So they, okay.
Like parking spaces.
Yeah.
I guess on this, I would, to move us along, I probably would propose that we either take this as proposed and have an additional amendment come for us on the list for next time.
Or I could propose.
Or you can propose it in something with.
I'm not sure who the proposer of this is, but I would ask the proposer if they'll accept the friendly amendment.
Well, this came from,
The
we have
subcommittee.
it as it came from the
Yeah,
subcommittee.
so I will ask my 2 fellow members of this. Do I have a second member of the work group to agree to accept a friendly amendment?
Not me.
I'm not going to be on that one. But I'm not opposed to that being coming forth as a separate amendment.
Fine.
Andre?
Go ahead, Ben, and then just in the interest of time, I'll be really quick.
Okay.
So I wasn't part of the small working group, but it seems to me that the whole reason why that came together was to look at the smaller projects on the smaller end, the fourplex and so on, in a different light. And that made sense that you came up with different standards. I would venture that perhaps the same rationale could be applied on whether you have an elevator building or not. Those are most likely not going to have an elevator, and it would make sense that you perhaps for larger projects, multiplexes, 3-4 stories, etc. Yes, you don't walk your bike up. You keep it at the ground floor or in a storage unit or in a storage in a specific dedicated room. But for smaller projects, you allow to do that, because I think it's in keeping with the spirit of the proposal of really having a different set of rules for smaller buildings and allowing more flexibility in the smaller buildings.
Okay, well, I'm hearing some interest in something that wasn't part of the scope of this little working group because we didn't talk about elevators in it. So I guess I will toss out an amendment as drafted right here for supporting option 1 and be happy to hear an amendment to follow up that would relate to the elevator question. So I'll
second
propose option
one.
number 1.
And Andre wanted to talk.
Oh, sorry, Andre.
Just real quickly, I support basically what Ben said at the first there. This was my understanding directed at the very small buildings to address the concerns there. So I'm supportive of that. I get concerned when it gets a slippery slope and we start, well, if we can do this, we can do a whole bunch of other things because of this. To me, there's a very good rationale here for small buildings, and it makes sense. I get concerned when we take that same rationale and apply it to larger buildings that have higher capital expenses, and we say, well, you can do the same thing. You can, but there's different inputs for that. So I'm supportive of this.
Okay.
I'll vote yes, whatever we want to do. But I'm not supportive of amendment to then go forward on something else larger. On elevators.
Okay, well, we can have that discussion with an elevator discussion. So I'm gonna, so I guess I'll make the motion for option 1.
And I'll second it.
Okay, discussion on that. Setting aside the other one. Okay, let's have a vote on that.
Okay. Baugh. Oh, sorry. Backrack.
I thought you were finally going in a different sequence.
You're stuck first.
Yes.
Baugh.
Yes.
Bortolazzo.
Yes.
Larcel. Yes. Quinones.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
St. Martin.
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes? All right. Now, you did mention number 14 was also out of the subgroup. Is there,
Oh.
I assume you have a reason for the logic order, or would you like to keep going with 12?
It was because we were keeping all the in-unit ones together. But if you guys would like to jump to 14, we can do that. But we just have a couple other in-unit related ones, so we're keeping all in-unit together.
And we've got 4 minutes, so I suggest we find an easy
Yeah.
one.
Let's
jump.
Let's jump to 14.
Okay.
The other one that the committee recommended.
All right. So this is the second topic that came out of the working group, and it was to set a threshold for when short and long-term bicycle parking apply to multi-dwelling uses. So if you remember in our current table 266, it just says multi-dwelling, and then it has the requirements for long-term and short-term. And so this is really to get to what is multi-dwelling. So I'm just going to show a couple tables because it's a little bit easier to show in that. So option 1, which is the proposal that came out of the work group, sort of sets 3 different thresholds when it comes to multi-dwelling buildings for required bicycle parking. So for 4 or fewer units on a site, there's no long-term and no short-term bicycle parking. So bicycle parking does not apply for 4 or fewer units on a site. For sites that have 5 to 12 units, long-term applies, but short-term does not apply. And again, given what we just passed, all that long-term could be within a dwelling unit. And then the final one is that for sites with 13 or more units, long-term and short-term bicycle parking apply. Staff have proposed a revised option 2 to sort of simplify those thresholds and what's in table 266. So basically saying for 5 or more units on a site, that's when bicycle parking is triggered. So anything below that, no bicycle parking standards. 5 or more units on a site, bicycle parking is required.
And the work group was chatting prior to the meeting starting, and I believe there's consensus on staff's option 2. So in the interest of time, I'll move option 2.
I'll second. Okay, we have a second from Andre. Let's take a vote on that. Oh, let's see if there are any comments. Yeah, Ben.
Well, it might be a moot point, but I'm actually intrigued by option 1 because I think it represents the spirit of this, where you have a progression from a smaller threshold to a higher threshold, and I was actually quite impressed by how that nicely fit in the. So I'm sure that you had a lot of discussions and reasoning behind these numbers.
The short answer is, and this I'll ask it so Chris can confirm that by applying short-term 5 to 12 units, there's only a 1 rack requirement.
Right.
So 2 spaces. So even if you're at 12 units, your obligation is 1 staple rack. And so I felt that's a minimal enough requirement. you could pay a few $100s to get out of it if you simply could not physically fit it.
Right.
So that's why I came around to support staff.
And it would be regressing from current code where you have to do that one staple for 3 or more. So we're already giving you 2 units. Didn't seem necessary to give the other 8.
Okay. Any more comments before we vote this one? All right, Julie, thanks.
Backrack?
Yes.
Baugh?
Yes.
Bortolazzo?
Yes.
Larcel?
Yes.
Quinones? Smith?
Yes.
St. Martin? Spivak?
Yes. Well, it is 2 o'clock, so I will transition out of this role and let Chris take over.
Okay. We're tag teaming, so
Halfway through.
So
Yeah,
we'll
halfway-
we'll
okay.
adjourn for 5 minutes while staff switches out and the commission has a chance to take a quick break.
I don't think I got through the hard halfway.
Thank you.
You guys, you wouldn't let the separate friendly in there?
So the final item on our agenda today is residential infill, and we have a disclosure statement. We're reading at all our residential infill proceedings. So Commissioners Quinones, Smith, Baugh, and Bachrach do not own any properties in single-family zones in Portland. Does anyone have any updates to that?
I have no updates to that, but I will share. I have sometimes been in communication with people who have property that would work for a planned development, so I'm out of the to be better safe than sorry, going to step out of that conversation as I have thus far, related to cottage clusters.
Okay, thank you. So we have two topics today. Staff is going to brief us on the revised proposal that they've crafted based on our input, and then we'll have a review of the displacement impact study. And to make sure we have enough time for the displacement discussion, we're probably going to limit in the first briefing, we'll limit it to clarifying questions. We don't want to get into debate at this point. We'll have plenty of opportunity for that. So let's keep questions on point to make sure we're understanding the proposal, but we'll hold off debate till later time. Daisy.
And I'll just say I might have to leave around 3:45.
Okay, thank you. All right, Sandra and Morgan.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. My name is Sandra Wood. I'm with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and with me today is Morgan Tracy. He's the Residential Infill Project Manager, and we're here to present the revised proposed draft for the Residential Infill Project. I do want to acknowledge that we didn't do all of this work on our own. We have an army of staff behind us who have really helped us with the code crafting and the displacement risk analysis and mitigation strategies and mapping and communications, outreach, et cetera. So I wanted to do a shout out to our excellent colleagues who have helped us, and we're representing the team here today. If you're following along at home on our YouTube site, this slide shows what all the materials that we have presented in front of the Planning and Sustainability Commission today. And on the back wall, we also have the documents that we'll share with the Commission today. A quick recap of where we've been. As you know, the Commission held public hearings in May of 2018. You had many work sessions in June and in August of last year. And then finally in September, we received direction from the Commission. And that direction entailed a series of straw polls to get general sense from the Commission's direction. That's what we have taken and codified and created new maps to present to you today. And while we were doing that, we revised the economic analysis, and since we had that prepared, we shared the economic analysis as a result of the Commission's direction in December. So that's the last time we were here, but officially that's when we're giving you that appendix today. As Chris mentioned, what we want to do today is to present the revised proposed draft. We think we can do that in about an hour if we stick to clarifying questions, and then spend the next hour on the displacement risk analysis and some mitigation strategies. We have another meeting scheduled on February 26th, which is your next meeting in 2 weeks, and that's where we can discuss potential amendment topics and see if there are any amendments from the Commission. I do want to remind the Commission that this draft is your amendments, so just a thought there. And then on March 12th, we'll come back around, finalize, and do the real vote, and we'll be on our way. Our project deliverables are many. We have revised a summary. That far left document is a colorful 8-page summary of what the Commission's so far direction is, what the revised proposed draft direction is. Volume 1 includes a staff report and map amendments. Volume 2 is the thickest, well, maybe not the thickest volume. It's a thick volume of the zoning code and code language and commentary. And then Volume 3 contains several appendices. Most of the appendices are the same as they have been from the proposed draft. The two exceptions are the economic analysis. Like I said, we discussed that already in December. And then today we'll be sharing Appendix H, which is the displacement risk analysis and mitigation strategies. So that's what's before you today. We will be working off a table that was sent to you by staff. So Morgan sent you a memo a few days ago, and included in that memo is a table that looks like this. I want to make sure all the commissioners have this table. It's attached to his memo dated dated
Yeah.
the 8th of
Were
February.
we supposed
February
to
8th.
bring it with us?
Is it, do we have it here?
No, I didn't bring it with me.
Okay, we will get you copies of that. I just sent somebody upstairs to get more copies, so that's what we'll be working with on today. Apologies for not having that in front of you. And we'll be going through basically the 12 key amendments. So the first table includes the direction that PSC gave us on the 12 key proposals, and those should look familiar to you. In one column, on the right column which is labeled staff revision. That contains changes that staff made to the proposal that was different from the PSC's direction. So in general, we were trying to codify what the PSC gave us direction to. We mapped what the PSC gave us direction to do, but there were some exceptions. Most of those exceptions are technical in nature and have to do with inconsistencies and clarity in the code. But there were 8 substantive changes, and we're going to mark those in the PowerPoint with a purple circle with a number on it, so we can walk through those. And Morgan will spend some time talking through what those substantive changes and why we came to those conclusions and needed to make those changes. So with that, before I pass it on to Morgan, I do want to remind the commission that I think one of the most fruitful conversations you had with this project was early on when we first started the hearing process and getting on the same page for what you as a commission we're really going to try to optimize this code package for. And this slide should look familiar to you. We've used it in all of our meetings, and it basically states 3 goals that the commission was really trying to get from this package of zoning code amendments: equitable benefits and costs, more housing options, and less expensive options. And I think with your amendments, you'll see that that you've probably achieved those and are doing a really good job moving those forward. So with that, does everybody have, people don't have,
extra
okay.
copy.
I will, are you the only one? Okay.
Everybody's good. Carry on.
Okay.
We'll get you copies.
I read it recently.
All right. Well, thank you. I wanted to start off by saying it's been a few months since we last had our direction from September. So what I'm planning to do here is not only just discuss the 8 substantive changes, but put it in context of the entire proposal. So those 12 key proposals in 2 distinct topics of our project. So we'll go through the whole table. I'll try to be brief, where we're not making we're not taking a lot of divergence in our approach, and spend most of the time addressing where the staff has made revisions. So, as I mentioned, the project proposals are split between 2 broad topics, and those are now housing options and scale, and the second set of topics relates to building design. So for housing options and scale, there are 7 key proposals that relate to that. The first is calls for allowing for more housing types. So the commission wanted to increase the range of housing types, not just duplexes and triplexes, but add 4plexes to the mix. We also have the allowance for a house to have 2 accessory dwelling units, or to have a duplex with a detached accessory dwelling unit. You also told staff to expand the A overlay to allow these additional housing types in more places. We did that, but by incorporating the allowances, we did that by incorporating the allowances in the base zone, and instead used a different overlay, a Z overlay, to signify the areas that had constraints. So these are our constrained parcels. The constrained parcels relate to properties with an inventory natural resource, areas with landslide risk, and areas within floodplains. So through a series of different data layers and analysis, we ultimately ended up with a slightly different map. So this map is showing the single dwelling zones from our proposed draft. The areas in yellow are the A overlay, the former proposal for the A overlay. The areas in pink and gray reflect the areas that were either outside of that A overlay or were in R10, R20, or RF zones. With the PSC's direction, the map looks more like this. So we now have additional housing types that are allowed in the base zone. And the additional housing types where they're not allowed are in the Z overlay, which is the smaller areas of pink. And the gray still reflects the R10, R20, and RF zones. What's important to note between these two maps is the land area that's represented. The yellow here is about 66% of the R25, R5, and R7 zones. This map reflects closer to 93%. So that's really the underlying premise of why we switched our overlay proposal. When you're talking about an overlay over 93%, it didn't make as much sense as incorporating those provisions into the base zone. So just to pause there if there are any questions about our mapping method or approach. Okay. Also, with respect to allowing for...
I do. I thought there was another slide on this topic.
Nope.
Then unmapped items. Do you have a water service, sewer service? I was sort of expecting there might be a way to or improved or unimproved or maintain roads.
Yeah.
Can we? That would further contract this area in a way I can't understand.
There are two other broad classifications that will constrict this map somewhat that are not mapped issues. One is infrastructure. So sewer, water, we looked at those constraints. There are existing standards in our other development titles that address when you cannot build.
Can I look that up somewhere? Like the water was a new one to me. If you can put a one-inch service for a house, could you use a one-inch service for something that would be in this overlay? Or if I had a lot, is there a way to look that up?
Yeah. So the constraint for the water service is really around where we have water mains that are less than 2 inches big. And that constrains how big a water meter you can attach to that water main. The water meter is dependent on how many fixtures you have in the structure, and how many fixtures you have in the structure is dependent on what you want to put in it, which is not related to the house or duplex or triplex or fourplex, but otherwise how many bathrooms, how many washers, dryers. And
that's why I wondered why it was on the list.
So it is possible. We did an estimate to find 4 units with a bathroom, a kitchen, washer, dryer, hose bibs, a sort of typical arrangement of fixtures, and it is possible to fit with a 3/4 inch water meter, which works. So if that's what you're proposing, that would be allowed under the Title 21, which is our water code. For sewer, it's really tied to where availability of sewer is versus a septic system. And for septic, it's an analysis of how much, again, it's a sort of fixture count, how much is going into the septic field and how much land area you have. So it's a very case-by-case kind of determination. We also had provisions related to paved streets, so we had some discussion on this commission about. We changed, there was some concern that the initial proposal had excluded state highways and private streets. We changed the proposal so that private streets that connect to a city-maintained street or state highway rather, can take advantage of these additional housing types. We didn't try to make the distinction between paved and unpaved private streets because there's no fixed standard for that. It's very hard to get very objective, clear and objective standards for that. So city-maintained streets, state-maintained highways, private streets that connect to those, they're all eligible. The third sort of category relates to the lot size, which is our next slide. So if you are on a lot that is below, in this case, depending on your zone and how many units you're proposing, the distinction here is really 1 to 2 units as one set of lot size standards, 3 to 4 units as a different set of lot size standards. So infrastructure, the street condition, which is kind of an infrastructure, and the lot sizes are not shown on this map because those are all variable and change day to day.
Well, in the period of moving along, let's do that, but I will have some follow-up on at least the infrastructure piece of this for later. Thanks.
And on the lot size issue, I thought I recalled a commission discussion where we talked about whether there'd be a minimum lot size, and we didn't feel strongly there should be.
So there was the conversation ultimately resulted in a proposal to change what we had proposed for R7. I think we had a 6,300 square foot lot size for R7, and the commission went with a 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. So we did establish two categories of lot sizes depending on the number of units.
Okay. Thank you.
The second proposal, so now we're talking about limiting the overall size of structures. The second proposal addresses the overall maximum size by using an FAR, floor to area ratio, so that's nothing new, at least as we've started. It is new to the single dwelling zones. The PSC directed that the FAR should increase as the number of units increases on the site. So for example, on an R5, 5,000 square foot lot, you would have a 2,500 square foot house, up to 3,000 square feet for a duplex, or 3,500 square feet for a triplex or fourplex. So that's a distinction from our initial proposal, which is set one size for all those different housing types. So here's a purple number. Number two, our substantive change number two. So the original proposal included an allowance for up to a 250 square foot alteration to occur on an existing house every five years. However, when we moved to the system of having escalating FARs based on the number of units in the structure and with the bonus FARs, having this provision sort of undermines the whole effectiveness of those incentives. So the staff determined that we would remove that allowance and just rely on the incentives that are built into the proposal, which is, as we talked about, if you wanted to get additional square footage, you would add an ADU or a second ADU to get that additional FAR bump, or make it or add to an existing house that also gets a bonus.
Teresa, and then Jeff, perhaps.
So I thought this was related primarily to remodels and additions to just somebody's house, and not adding extra units or whatever. Did I miss that?
So our initial the initial proposal that we presented from April set one size FAR limit, and we didn't have incentives built in to add additional units. So if you were at the 2,500 square foot number, or you're even below, but you're above that and you want to do a small bump out addition, there was this allowance to let you get a little bit of extra square footage without having to worry about the FAR requirement. With the new escalating incentive of FARs for building a duplex or building a triplex, the other series of bonuses relates to existing houses. If you're adding a unit to an existing house or doing an internal conversion, there's additional FAR that you can achieve doing those types of proposals as well. With that in place, if we had a 250 square foot addition allowance, that basically cuts your incentive in half. And over 10 years, it eliminates your incentive altogether. So we decided to keep the momentum behind the incentives. We removed this allowance.
But this was meant for, I don't want to build a lot of stuff. I just need a bigger dining room or a master bedroom in my current house.
Yeah. I think maybe I can clarify. If your current house is 2,200 square feet, you could just do it. If your house is a large existing house that exceeds the FAR limits of this code update and it's one dwelling, then you would not be able to do it, or you might need, or maybe you could do it if you add a dwelling unit in there.
That's correct. But what's the concern? You're going to build a mansion over 20 years, bit by bit?
Well, I mean, that was a slight concern. It wasn't a significant concern with our initial proposal. The bigger concern is if you're at 2,500 square feet, and really what the commission was driving us toward was we want to increase the unit uptake. We want to have more duplexes, more triplexes, more fourplexes. If you can get that square footage by just waiting 5 years, then you're not going to do that, or you're less likely to do that.
Jeff?
I kind of agree where Teresa started. This is apples and oranges. I mean, if you want to add, we want to encourage people to add more units. ADUs, duplexes, if they redevelop, we want 2, 3, 4, we all agree on that goal. This was simply very different. I'm a current homeowner. I want to do a 250-foot improvement on my house. I'm not interested in ADUs or redevelopment. I think it was just a safety valve for people who, have a 2,900 square foot house and now can't do a 200 square foot improvement to their kitchen or dining room. And I think we want to give that sort of liberty and flexibility to existing property owners. So
I think we should flag this for discussion. Clearly the commission's got interest. Andre, do you want to add on to that? Or
Thanks.
Okay. That's why we're having this conversation. Like the last proposal, in the first proposal, the attics and basements will be excluded from FAR calculations. Bonus FAR is provided for either providing an affordable unit or adding units to a site with an existing house, like we just talked about. So if you have a house that's at least 5 years old and you're adding an ADU, not only do you get from 2,500 to 3,000 square feet, because that's 2 units that's allowed, you also get another 500 square feet because you're utilizing the existing house or the site with the existing house. So you can leverage that bonus to 3,500 square feet for a house and an ADU in that case.
Jeff?
Where do we end up with sheds, garages? I got lost in some nuanced discussions we had about how they count towards FAR.
Good. I'm glad you're raising that. So whether it's an ADU or a detached garage or a shed, as long as it's a building and has a roof and 4 walls, it's counted towards FAR. So I use ADU because when we're talking about increasing numbers of units, the ADU is sort of the first place most homeowners are going in their minds. But if you had a house, no ADU, just 1 unit by itself, the house was 2,000 square feet, you could have 500 square feet of a garage, detached garage, as long as the total for the site was totaling 2,500 square feet for everything.
Didn't we have some nuances there we consider about sheds or out something smaller? Eli, is that something
in the
recall?
In staff's proposal, there was a nuance. It was calculated separately. The house had 1 FAR, and then you were guaranteed a 0.15 FAR for detached accessory structures. The commission instead decided to join the FAR and do 1 combined FAR for the site, which doesn't guarantee a detached structure FAR.
Okay, thank you.
But this actually is a good introduction to our next question. So this is this relates to a package of historic incentives that we had in the last proposal. So the PSC did not specifically direct the proposed draft to remove historic incentives, but the incentives that were only available to historic resources have since been incorporated into the base zone allowances per the PSC direction. For example, we had a differentiation that in the last proposal that if you had 2 ADUs, one had to be inside the house and 1 could be detached, but you couldn't have both detached. The PSC wanted to expand that allowance and allow for 2 detached ADUs. Also did not want to make a differentiation between corner lots and interior lots for where 3 or 4 units were allowed. So 4plexes, triplexes allowed on interior and corner lots. We had in the initial proposal different FARs for the detached structure and the primary structure. The PSC directed us to combine those for the site. So that was another flexibility that we had previously provided for historic resources only. And then there's this bonus FAR for internal conversions with existing historic resources, which now applies to all existing houses. So the only remaining provision that was left after all that incorporation was a restriction on sites where the historic resource has been demolished. So in these cases, a duplex, triplex, or fourplex would not be allowed on the site where a historic resource was previously existing and was approved for demolition. With the incentives removed, the restriction was also removed, and project staff felt that the proposal became imbalanced by only stipulating additional penalties for sites with historic resources, and instead, the historic resource should rely on existing protection measures, including demolition review or delay. So essentially, we've taken away all the carrots and we're just left with a stick. And in this case, we felt it was more appropriate to just return that site after it's gone through its appropriate procedure to be demolished. If it gets approved, then that site should be treated like other similarly situated sites.
For myself, I support this change, but I seem to remember from that like you can do like daycare by right, or that's like the landmarks section of code.
Yeah, there are some
others. There's a whole other list somewhere else. That maybe it's outside of.
There's a package of incentives in the historic resource chapter, and there's another project forthcoming
Okay.
It's coming
So we
through.
can table that for
Yeah.
other. That all remains in place. Okay.
Yeah, other
Thanks.
protections, other incentives that are part of a different
Thanks.
conversation.
Are people understanding this slide? That we did have some historic resource protection incentives. All of those were incorporated into the base zone, so they're available to everybody now, so that there isn't anything specifically for historic, because they're available to everyone. Okay.
Okay. The third proposal relates to visitability. So when we're talking about visitability, it's generally a zero-step entry, wider doors, a bathroom on the ground floor with some living area. So this is a sort of low-level accessibility standard. We did some additional work on our exemptions. There was some concern on the from the commission about adding additional cost in terms of getting to that zero-step entry, especially on lots that are a little more difficult to work with, and based on their, they could be a raised lot, and they're up from the street a fair amount of distance. The Better Housing by Design team looked at some cost estimates for lots that were above 3 feet. So we've built in some exemptions that remove those raised lots. We have exempted steeply sloping lots, which are 20% grade. We also exempt existing structures because we recognize it's difficult to retrofit the structure to lower it down to the ground. So there was a lot of discussion on the commission's part over several of our work sessions in terms of whether to incent it, whether to require it, whether to not require it, and pursue a different legislative change at the state level. And ultimately, the commission landed on basically where we started, which was for the third or fourth unit, at least one of the units has to be visitable.
Question? Teresa?
Where are the exemptions? How are they captured? Is this like an individual? You go there and say, "Here's my site," or is there some color map somewhere?
It's not mapped, but in the volume 2 in our code, there's very specific language about how we define what a raised lot is, because it's pretty nebulous. But what we're really talking about is it's a measurement of the sidewalk in relation to the elevation at the front door. So if that elevation difference is more than 3 feet, then that structure is exempt from that requirement.
Okay. I'm looking at the clock, and we're halfway through our time period. We're only on number 3, so be succinct, Jeff.
Quick question on the UBC. You mentioned someplace that you removed a wider doorway, wider hallway standard because of UBC requirements. So my bigger question is, where do we land on, can we do this? Is this a UBC issue? Are we, because they have,
Yeah.
you can't, we can't mandate building code, and I'm just sort of wondering why on one issue we're deferring to UBC, but otherwise we're going beyond UBC, or how did you work that through?
It's a good question. So this really has to relate to our ability to, whether we can preempt state building code, and the answer is no. The issue for us, or the opportunity for us, is that we're talking about something that's an additional bonus, an additional option, right? It's residential infill option, triplex or fourplex, not generally allowed, but now we've tied it to this visitability requirement. What we did was then went back to the building code and looked at areas where, are we in conflict? I mean, if we're going to require something, do we need to require it? So in the case of the hallways are already required to be 36 inches wide, and we were saying they have to be 34 inches wide. Don't need that standard. In terms of slopes to the front door, the Uniform Building Code allows you to go to a certain level. We figured we'd just be in alignment with that percentage, just to reduce the amount of disparity or differences between these two standards. But they're kind of not directly tied to each other.
And this is a different visitability is different for Better Housing by Design, which you will discuss, and you probably had some discussions already. Because this is bonus units, we have more leeway than we do in Better Housing by Design, where there's minimum densities.
So kind of moving this along a little more quickly, there was a direction from the PSC. We were talking about requiring at least 2 dwelling units on vacant double-sized lots in the R2.5 zone, so the commission expanded that to also apply to double-sized lots in the R5 and R7 zones. We also looked at rezoning about half of the historically narrow lots from R5 to R2.5, so that is in the proposal, the revised proposal. The PSC directed that the remaining R5 historically narrow lots also be allowed to be built at a slightly lower FAR than R2.5 with pairs of attached houses. So essentially the distinction between R25 and R5 historically narrow lots is the R5 lots will have lower FARs.
And what this map shows is in the orange is existing R2.5, and we're just sharing that for context. So that's not changing. The purple are the lots that are being rezoned from R5 to R2.5. And then there's some, like especially in North Portland, if you can take a look there, there's like little hatching in black. Those are pre-platted lots that will remain R5, but will be allowed to be confirmed with the lower FAR, with the regular FAR in R5. So that's what this map shows.
Part of the next proposal allowing for small flag lots through property line adjustment relates to this historically narrow lot condition. So where we have pairs of historically narrow lots and there's an existing house, this will allow somebody to take their property line from underneath the house and create a flag lot in the backyard. Our initial proposal was that there were limitations on that backyard house, basically to treat it more like what you would see for a detached ADU or accessory structure. Lower height limits, lower size limits, some exterior design limitations. And the PSC gave us direction to cap the size and apply exterior design requirements to the R25 flag lots, and a slightly different proposal for R5. Where staff came in was we wanted to have a better, clearer differentiation between R5 and the R2.5 zones. So in the R5 zone, small flag lots are substandard in size, R5 being typically a 5,000 square foot on average lot size. These would be somewhere in the ballpark of 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. So as they are substandard in size, the resulting house on the flag lot has some additional limitations on it. In the R2.5 zone, the flag lot is a standard size lot. It's anywhere between 1,600 and 2,500 square feet is standard size in R2.5. Therefore, the house, the flag lot house, would not be subject to any particular additional restrictions, meaning the same height limits, the 0.7 FAR, and no exterior design requirements for that flag lot house. It's a cleaner break between the two zones and the expectations of those zones. Plan developments.
We already did number 6. Okay. So the next topic is to continue to allow different building forms and site arrangements through a plan development. So we call these plan development reviews. And the direction we received from the commission was to align, another word for these are cottage clusters, so align the cottage cluster allowances with the land division rules. And the observation made by the commission was that there was not a level playing field between these two types of development. So you imagine a really large single dwelling site being divided into subdivisions like traditional single dwelling lots would go through less scrutiny than a large site achieving the same number of units potentially on a large site would go through more scrutiny. So the direction was align those and create a level playing field so they can both be achieved. We did that for largely, we were trying to codify what the commission requested. And for these 4 items, we largely did that. For the review procedure, what we had to do was translate for a land division, the review procedure, meaning I hate to use the word, the hoops you have to jump through, but the review that the applicant has to go through with the city with public notice and public hearings, et cetera. A type 1 is the lowest, type 2 is the next, and type 3 is the most time consuming and expensive. A type 3 requires a public hearing. So for a land division, the review procedure, which step you go through, depends on the number of lots. For a cottage cluster plan development, there is no number of lots, so we needed to figure out a new measure to decide which of those review procedures they would go through. we landed on looking at the number of units created in that cottage cluster and trying to do a parallel track. So what this means is that many planned developments that would have gone through a type 3 public hearing, we've dropped those down to a type 2 to be in alignment with the land division regulations too. So that's what we did for the procedure types. For Florida area racial limits, we also had to do a translation because there are many different types of units happening in these cottage clusters. Sometimes there's lots of little cottages, sometimes there's a fourplex and a duplex, sometimes there's multi-dwelling and something else. So the way we translated it was to anytime there's 3 or more units, they were given the maximum amount of FAR. So normally in the zone, it's 1 house is 0.5 FAR, 2 units is 0.6 FAR, 3 is 0.7. And in this case, we would say 4 is 0.7, 8 is 0.7, 12 is 0.7, 20 is 0.7. So giving them the maximum FAR. So that's what that translation looked like. The visitability requirements we need to translate too, because in the single, in a subdivision, the third and fourth unit, the third unit needs to be visitable. So we require every third unit to be visitable in the planned development. And then finally, for accessory dwelling units, we landed on a unit is a unit and is a unit in a cottage cluster, so that there isn't a primary structure and an accessory structure. Each unit is just considered a unit on the site. And Morgan will talk to you about the 2 substantive changes that we needed to make the plan development work.
Okay. So all encapsulated in one slide, one simple slide, but a very complicated topic. With regard to density, each land division lot in the R5 and R7 zones can allow a fourplex. So on a fourplex lot, your minimum lot sizes are 4,500 and 5,000 square feet respectively for those zones. Because the average lot size for R5 is 5,000, the average lot size for R7 is 7,000 square feet. There's not a conflict when we're talking about average lot sizes and allowing fourplexes and and translating that into how much density is allowed in a planned development situation. So for R7 and R5, you take the site area, you divide by 5,000 or 7,000, that gives you a number of lots. You multiply that times 4, gives you the amount of density that's allowed on the planned development site. So that was actually pretty easy. When we got to R2.5, it got a little more convoluted because the average lot size is 2,500 square feet, R2.5, but the minimum lot size for 3 or 4 units is 3,200 square feet. So we had this mismatch between the lot size and our density standard, multiplying that back out. So the way this works is in R2.5, you take the site size, you divide by 2,500. That gives you the number of lots that could accommodate 2 units, and you double the density. So a little bit of a different distinction for R2.5 than R5 and R7, but generally results in a more equivalent outcome between land divisions and the plan development sites. No questions? Wow, awesome. All right. Building coverage is a little easier. We did get direction from the commission to explore looking at a static set of building coverage requirements. So right now, if you look at our building coverage standard, it is a formula based on how big the lot is. So a 5,000 square foot lot is 2,250 square feet of building coverage plus some percentage of additional coverage for each square foot the larger the lot gets. So it's just sort of it's kind of on a curve. The concern that the commission expressed is on really large sites, you have this sort of diminishing building coverage that happens because as the lots get larger and larger, the effective building coverage gets less and less and less. So there's a little bit of a disparity between large site plan developments and single lots in a land division. And the proposal or the suggestion from the PSC was, what if we just set a single numeric threshold like 45% building coverage for R5 plan development sites? We looked at that. One of the results of that approach, however, is that we actually reduce the amount of flexibility we have in a plan development. the way that happens is we looked at the past 20 or 30 plan developments over between 2002 and 2015. There were 2 cases where building coverage modifications were requested. So these particular proposals couldn't meet the existing building coverage standard, so they requested that standard to be modified, which is just it's like an adjustment or a variance to that requirement. In both those cases, the modification request was granted. By moving a specific standard into the plan development chapter, we take away the ability to modify that standard because that standard is designed for plan development specifically. So there's no ability to contemplate modifying that standard. It's a set number. So we're actually reducing how much flexibility we have to vary the type of building coverage we're applying on different plan development sites, which is counter to the whole purpose of plan development. Plan development sort of take the code and say, let's look at more what's compatible with the surrounding area. What are the sort of the constraints of the particular sites or site dynamics or lot configurations or particular structure types, or it takes the lid off of the underlying base zone and says, with this type of density, with this site area, what's a more innovative site design to apply here? So ultimately, we explored the proposal to apply a static building coverage, and determined that it's a better outcome to leave the existing building coverage in place and allow modifications to occur on a case-by-case basis. So that's ultimately where we landed up. All right, we've made it to our second topic of buildings design. There isn't a lot of change from...
Should we pause a second, wait for Commissioner Spivak to join us?
Yeah. So just in terms of context, the second topic has 5 key proposals. These move away from our housing options and size of buildings, but are more around what do the buildings look like, how do we address some of the compatibility of the infill development. So the first proposal, the first of these key proposals is revising how the height is measured. And there wasn't much change here from the proposed draft. We're still measuring height from the lowest point, providing allowances for dormer roofs, and allowing for 2.5-story houses in most cases. For building features and articulation, similarly, we have the same proposed limits on the height of the front door above grade, the same allowance for 2-foot eave projections, and we also incorporated the PSC's direction to remove the requirement that corner lot duplex doors face separate streets. So on corner lots for duplexes, the doors can face the same street. For greater flexibility for ADU design, we removed previous proposals that staff had presented that further limited height. So there was a proposal that said the height had to be within a certain distance of the primary structure. That is no longer part of the proposal. With the combined FAR for the site, there's no longer a limitation on how big that detached accessory structure can get. We were kind of running into the 750 square foot maximum. So that's going away with this combined FAR approach. We still have a provision to allow for larger ADUs in basements of existing houses, existing house being defined as a 5-year-old house. And we removed the limitation that restricted the ADU front door to not be on the same facade as the front door of the house. So this makes it easier for converting garages, for example, into ADUs, attached garages. Moving right along on the parking, modifying parking rules, at the direction of the PSC, we removed the parking minimums from single-dwelling residential zones and kept the proposal that where a lot abuts an alley, the parking access must be from the alley, and you'll see that proposal also has migrated or is repeated in the Better Housing by Design project as well. We have 2 big changes that relate to our parking rules, and the first one relates to vehicle area limits. And when we talk about vehicle area limits, we're talking about the driveways and the parking spaces themselves. So to respond to the direction the PSC gave Better Housing by Design when that project came to present the proposals around garages and parking, the PSC wanted to see greater consistency between Better Housing by Design and residential infill. So both projects are proposing to require that for narrow lots, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes Driveways and parking will be prohibited between the building and the street. So those are the crosshatched candy striped areas on those diagrams. There is an exception that allows for a driveway leading to a parking space that's located entirely behind the front of the building. So in the example with the alley, obviously vehicle access from the alley is going to be required. In the example with the duplex there, you've got a garage, a driveway leading to a parking space in the garage, shared driveway to parking spaces in the back. I think Better Housing had proposals that showed notches in the building to accommodate a parking space next to the building, so that would be allowed in both sets of zones. Also to note that this prohibition doesn't apply to lots that are houses on lots that are wider than 32 feet. The second substantive change, actually the last substantive change to cover here today, relates to our garage limitations. So similarly, changes were made to align the garage limits for both Better Housing and the residential infill proposals. In addition, the PSC gave us direction to align requirements between townhouses, which are multiple attached units on a single lot, and row houses, which are units that are attached on individual lots. So townhouses, all one lot, row houses, different lots, but the buildings look the same. There's just property lines underneath them. The PSC wanted those two situations to be treated more alike. So now for houses, duplexes, triplexes, and up to 3 townhouses or row houses, there's a garage limitation of 50% on the combined building facade. So for a house, it's pretty easy. It's the house. Half the house is limited to garage. For a duplex, regardless of whether it's side-by-side or front-to-back units or top and bottom, the combined facade is looked at. Half of that is limited to garage. The real twist here is when we get to 4 or more units, whether they're fourplexes or attached houses, the garage limitation of 50% of the combined building facade still applies, but at least 50% of the non-contiguous or non-garage area, the living area, has to be in contiguous space. So this avoids the pattern of living space, garage, living space, garage, living space, garage. And what we're really trying to do is honor the PSC's desire to reduce the number of curb cuts along a street, combine garages and driveways where we could. Well, this could have an effect is it probably for narrower type facade units, not all of them are going to have a garage. So on a fourplex, you're probably 2 or 3 garages out of 4 units if they're all street facing. So just a heads up on that.
And just a reminder that parking would not be required, but if somebody were providing parking, this is how it could turn out.
I know how much we struggled with this in the subcommittee, so thank you for the creativity. Mm-hmm.
Be sure to tell Bill Cunningham that too. Lastly, looking at improving building design on narrow lots, these two haven't changed either. So we're still looking at limiting the height of detached houses to 1.5 times their width on a narrow lot, and for lots that are 25 feet wide or less, attached houses will be required. And there's some exceptions for that too. But there's existing development on both sides of the lot. So that gets us to the end of.
Yeah, so that brings us to.
Anybody dying to ask a question before we get into displacement? So Eli, then Teresa.
If we have if we have 2 minutes, back to the sewer water item at the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm just not understanding it. It doesn't seem like it's a clear objective standard. And if I want to build a house that's in need, whether it's a house with ADU or a duplex, it's going to need a 1-inch water line, and it's an area where the in the streets a 2-inch line. Then the city says you better replace that line. I've got to pay for it. Like it's the same thing for sewer. If you like in any any neighborhood, if you want to build something and the city's infrastructure is not there for it, then the developer has to pay for it. I don't see why that would guide.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It just means that if you have that condition and you're not able to have a 1-inch water line, you either need to improve it, upsize the water line to allow for that larger meter, or you don't build whatever it is you're building.
So why would that be an exception? Why would that be part of the zoning code to say you can't? Are you saying the zoning code would be silent on those topics?
Yeah. So
Okay.
Yeah. The only thing that's in the zoning code in terms of the infrastructure piece is the maintained streets, and that's because PBOT, the Bureau of Transportation, will accept LTIC payments for street improvements or partial street improvements, which affect the frontage but not connect to anything. So what we're really after there is something that connects to the rest of the system. But for the other utilities, they're all treated the same. The house versus
Okay.
So it's not codified in our zone.
So I guess I'm saying Title 33 is going to be silent on those things.
That's my bad, because I think when I edited this on that substantive change at the bottom, I had exclude the following areas through the code provisions, but it's not in the zoning code. It's other.
Okay.
Through the
other
parts.
titles.
I went about a third through this pile, and you guys rocked it on terms of communicating, translating our straw votes into the code, whether it was stuff that I supported or didn't or whatever. I think compliments to staff on at least pinning it down pretty well.
If you all followed that part of the presentation, then kudos to all of you too.
All right, Teresa.
So I just wanted to see if you had any comments on House Bill 2001 and if it has impacts on what we're doing and timing, things we should be concerned about or care about.
The parts of House Bill 2001 that could have impacts on this, we're sort of demonstrating how to implement a version of what House Bill 2001 would allow everywhere. The provisions about where you get to apply standards vis-a-vis siting are not, they're more generally stated in House Bill 2001, so if they became a particular thing, they may conflict with what we've done, but it's hard to believe because you've done such an extensive job on that. There's provisions about how SDCs are paid that aren't really related to the code that we've adopted, but are going to be problematic for cities to implement. So there's some things, the things that refer to the requirements to provide middle housing and having codes to do it and how to do it, I think we seem pretty much in line with and are supportive of the bill, and you all are down the road and actually implementing it.
And it's totally a work in progress. It's going to change.
Mm-hmm. Before we leave this, we just went through Table 1. We do not need to go through Table 2, but I do want to bring Table 2 to your attention. Those are some more technical changes that were made that were not related to the 12 key proposals. What we were trying to do is, the big picture, those 12 key proposals is what we wanted to walk you through. But if you would take some time to read the other key changes and make sure you're okay with them, because those are in the draft code, and we can discuss it next time if you have questions about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'd like to, we'll have our colleague Tyler Bump join us, and he is on his way out. So now we're shifting gears to the displacement risk analysis, which is Appendix H of the report. It's the analysis and mitigation strategies. As you know, the city's established an equity lens as a guiding principle in the comp plan and before that in the Portland plan. And this is the recognition that equitable access to opportunity is really essential for the long-term prosperity and success of Portland as a city and for Portlanders who live here and new Portlanders who are going to be joining us. The comp plan calls for new plans, and when we say new plans, we mean zoning code amendments and policy plans. So it calls for new plans to evaluate the possibility of causing displacement or increasing housing costs in vulnerable communities. So we did a displacement risk analysis with our proposed draft. The Commission asked us to redo the analysis using the latest and greatest tools, which is what we've done. The report consists of two parts. The first part examines who is vulnerable and describes that. Who's vulnerable to displacement, and where redevelopment is most likely to occur under the residential infill project proposal. The second part presents potential strategies to mitigate displacement among vulnerable residents in single dwelling zones. One of the these are the two comp plan policies, and I know there's nothing closer to your heart than comp plan policies, so we're going to bring them alive today. The two policies are 5.15, which is gentrification displacement risk, and it says to evaluate plans and investments, so that's these projects that we take forward, for the potential to increase housing costs for or cause displacement of communities of color, low and moderate income households, and renters. Identify and implement strategies to mitigate the anticipated impacts. The other policy that we're looking closely at is 5.16 about involuntary displacement. And it reads, when plans and investments are expected to create neighborhood change, limit the involuntary displacement of those who are underserved and underrepresented. Use public investments and programs and coordinate with nonprofit housing organizations to create permanently affordable housing and to mitigate the impacts of market pressures that cause involuntary displacement. So that's what this analysis is about, and that provides us with a framework and direction, in essence, from community members who have told us when we pass zoning code amendments or plans, we need to be looking at this. I want to give kudos to Tyler Bump and to Nick Coble from our office. Not only did they take the reins and measure how the impacts of this project, what the impacts of this project were on displacement, but they also created a methodology for measuring what the impacts of the do-nothing scenario is, because that's what our charge here is with the residential infill project, what is the difference between the do-nothing and doing these proposed zoning code amendments. So that do-nothing scenario is pretty critical in understanding what the impacts of this proposal are. And I think we call it the baseline scenario or the comp plan scenario in the document itself. So I just wanted to share that. We're going to be going through a lot of slides here, and most of those slides contain maps, and those maps are in front of you in paper copy also, but perhaps your screen or on the PowerPoint might be an easier way to look at them. And with that, I'll pass it on to Tyler.
Thank you, Sandra. My name is Tyler Bump. I'm a senior economic planner here at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. A little bit louder. I'll move in closer. So first off, before we get into this, I want to sort of frame this discussion around two things. One is that there's a lot of maps and there's a lot of charts and there's a lot of numbers in here, but when we talk about displacement, it's a personal issue and it impacts people. And so there's a lot of things in here, but I don't want to oversimplify the issue and I don't want to depersonalize it, and I want to make sure that we respect the experiences that folks have and are going through right now. And so sort of starting off with that lens, I think is really important. The second thing is there are numbers and there are charts, but it's most important as we've been looking through this information to look at the trends and really what the proposal does to the baseline scenario, to the do nothing, and how that advances our goals and our comprehensive plan policies. And I think a lot of the things that the commissioners have talked about here over the last year. So less impact on the actual discrete numbers, more overall trends. I'm going to go through some of that too here, and hopefully that'll be pretty clear. So starting here, we had to define what displacement for this project actually meant. And so we sort of started off this discussion with three types of displacement, thinking about these. And this is really the beginning of our work. And we looked at three types of displacement: direct displacement, and this occurs when government acquires property through eminent domain and a property owner is forced to sell their home. We looked at indirect displacement. That occurs when policy changes create measurable impacts on market dynamics, such as increase in rates of redevelopment. And we also were thinking about induced displacement. Induced displacement occurs when market conditions respond to new development and changes in neighborhood character and impact existing housing units in terms of rents or prices. And the induced part of that is really the market component. Some of the things that we don't necessarily control, some things that the market does on its own. And so in terms of this project, what we're really evaluating is this indirect displacement part of that.
Can I ask, do you want us to hold our questions or should we ask as we go? Or
if you got a clarifying question, go ahead and ask it so we all understand.
Well, I just was wondering, is indirect displacement and induced displacement, would that be like, it almost seems like first stage and then later stage. Is that what you were thinking, or?
I think they can, indirect and induced can happen at the same time. What we're evaluating in terms of indirect is like, allowing 3 or 4 units, 2, 3 or 4 units, and what that does to overall market conditions and where that's likely to happen. We don't have any control over how much a landlord asks for rent, how much house costs in certain locations, and those things go up and down. So that's a little bit of the induced side of it, the
Well,
things we don't really control.
So indirect would be more like mechanical, almost like just it takes place because of some change in zoning,
Right.
and then the other would be more, okay, you made this change, and now people are doing this, and they see, wow, this is a cool deal. Let's run in and buy a bunch of property there. Is that what you're?
That's
Yeah,
a good
okay.
interpretation of what this
So-
of the framing that we're thinking
And
of.
when I think of that, I think of first stage and second stage, or even early
Oh.
stage and late stage. Yeah. Okay. That's all.
So to start off with the initial findings here and what we're looking at, I think this is one of the big key points here is that I'm going to talk about this initial big finding and then go to how we got there and some of the details specifically. But really what we're looking at here is, as the result of the residential infill proposals, a net reduction in displacement risk citywide. And that varies depending on where we look, neighborhoods that we look at, and different geographies that we look at. But citywide, it's about a 28% reduction in displacement pressures for
What's the time frame for this chart?
now through 2035. So we're still working within the context of our comp
That's the
plan
20-year
horizon,
displacement.
right?
Okay.
20-year displacement. And so
Just and this is citywide, right? So this is the average.
this is citywide. And we do look at displacement risk areas specifically, and I'll get into what that means and sort of how we're looking at this stuff for different geographies. But 28% citywide, and then we'll dig a little bit into this in the end after we get through some of these. So a little bit of the framework for how we were thinking about it also from a methodology standpoint is we started off with this geography and how do we report information, what sort of inputs do we have, what information do we have to help us understand these issues and the impact of the project. And we're really looking at these two things, citywide and displacement risk areas. And displacement risk areas, let's sort of put off to the side. I'll talk about in a couple minutes what that means. Most of the commissioners are familiar with this map that I'm going to show in a second. But these two geographies are what we're looking at. And then the inputs, and these are kind of the really important ones. Where redevelopment happens, where it's likely to happen, where vulnerable households are, and we determine or identify vulnerability through number of factors that I'll talk about in a second, and the amount of low-income renters in single-family structures specifically. So this is one of the first projects that we really dug down and really thought about who is specifically at risk from a project, who has control and who doesn't have control, and who ultimately is burdened by the project. So this ultimately feeds into our impact. And so we looked at impact to households at risk at these different areas. The important thing to understand here is we've done this for two different scenarios. The baseline comp plan, the do nothing scenario, and the residential infill project scenario, and then what the change is across those. So we'll go over those maps. That a little bit inform some of the maps that you see in front of you. The displacement risk areas, I want to spend a second or a couple minutes talking about this. The displacement risk areas are the gentrification and displacement typologies that we've been working on here at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for about 6 years now, actually. We presented, Tom Armstrong, Nick Coble, and myself presented our update to the gentrification typology in March of last year, so almost a year ago. And so we're sort of taking that concept and the concerns about vulnerable households and integrating that into our work and integrating that into how we evaluate the impacts of our projects. So what this shows is a simplified version of all of those typologies. And to get to the sort of stage of gentrification, we have multiple stages in that typology. I don't want to go too far into the weeds on that. This is the original work that Dr. Bates did in 2013 of identifying these typologies. And so we've got susceptible, early, dynamic, late, and continued loss are the typologies. Those are all rolled up into these displacement risk areas. So these are the areas that you see in the pink on the map here, or the peachy color, that have the highest share of renters, that have the highest share of communities of color, that have the highest share of low-income households, and have the highest share of individuals with less than a bachelor's degree in education. And the reason that we look at those is because those cumulative factors really present challenges for folks to absorb economic shocks, such as eviction, such as displacement pressures. And so we're really using this as a framework to think through impact. The drill down really that we're doing in this project is on low income renters in single family residential structures specifically. And this map shows low income, the percent of single family renters that are low income of all renters in single family structures. So yes. Defined
Low income defined
as 80% or below median family income. So that's the sort of threshold that we use for low income and affordable housing. And so we've used 80% as the threshold of below. And it's about 14,000 households in the city are low income renters in single family residential structures. So we've done a lot of digging about who lives where those concentrations are, and where the impact of the project is.
So clarifying question on that. So one of the use cases we discussed when we were debating this was, the 5 college students who get together and rent a house. How would they show up in this typology?
They would show up. It depends on their income, obviously. I can't say how many. There's a lot of college students that have some money somehow. I don't understand it. But it depends on their income. But they would show up as a low-income renter in single-family structure.
So even if it's not a typical family household, you've got a way to measure that and figure it out.
That's right. And so we look at that cumulative impact. And you can see that a little bit on here. It's not something that we drill on, but you can see that there's areas around Reed College and University of Portland. So those higher education institutions really do impact this a little bit, but this is sort of a deeper drill down. Another thing that we really sort of refer back to consistently throughout this project is specifically on households of color. And because of our guiding principle in our comp plan and city policies around racial equity, we really want to ground ourselves in the impact of this on communities of color and households of color. And the reason for that is because leading with race and the intersectionality with other variables that put households at risk for displacement. And so we're really working towards integrating this. When we do all this work, we look at this relative to the other geographies that we're looking at. This map aligns very, very well with the vulnerable households map, that displacement risk analysis. So all of these things start to come together and really help us realize that there are some areas that we need to be concerned about. And so those are the ones that we're looking into in this project. This is where things get really interesting. And I should note that doing the baseline scenario, the change that was asked of us was really a mind bender a little bit of trying to figure out how to do this, and we feel really good about how we did it, but it was an interesting exercise to go through. And so really what we're looking at in this map here is the residential unit, the likelihood of new units under our comp plan scenario. So this is our baseline for single dwelling zones. So if we did nothing with residential infill, this is likely the locations where we're going to see housing in R2, R2.5, R5, and R7 zones right now on the books. And it's important to look at this because there's geographic differences around where these units are likely to go. A lot of them are in East Portland, a lot of them are on the peninsula in North Portland, and there's sort of clean distribution throughout, or an even distribution throughout some of the inner neighborhoods as well. So this is sort of a grounding map that under the baseline scenario, we are likely to see a significant amount of new residential in the single dwelling zones. And so we're evaluating the change against this.
Everybody's tracking. It's the darker the color, the more the units.
The more the units, right.
It's built on single dwelling lots.
Correct. Yes.
Can I just ask, clarifying, because I sometimes don't realize what I don't know. So you're saying that this is the baseline scenario, and if we didn't do RIP, this is the way it would change.
Right.
This is where growth would go in
2035.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Eli, then Daisy.
I'll toss the question out, although it might be more relevant later if you think some of these areas, a lot of that rectangle is zoned multi-dwelling. So can you just, I assume what you're doing is just looking at the single dwelling part of it for this analysis, but
yes.
Is there some parallel world analysis, or that's just too much to tackle? Like, it seems like that project has there's a role of that project too.
There is a role with that project, and I think when we get there and evaluating these together, doing that with Better Housing by Design is going to be the next part of that, specifically for multi-dwelling. But these are specific to the single dwelling zones, and there is a new unit, our forecast, our best guess at new units in the multi-dwelling zones, and those shift really depending on the different proposals. And so We have to look at it at a point in time and where we are in terms of proposals at a point in time. I feel a little bit like a time traveler when we start to think about this stuff and the complexity of it. And but there is that level of complexity and need to evaluate these multiple projects too. And they're under the proposal scenario, which we'll look at in a second. There are some changes between the multi-dwelling and the single dwelling and the types of units and where those go.
Does this take into account market conditions? And we've heard a lot about like there's going to be less construction just because of the market. Does that take that into account?
Yes, a little bit. So this is using our 20-year forecast that we got from Metro, the regional government, 123,000 new households by 2035. And that sort of averages out the ups and the downs in these market cycles. Up to this point, we've sort of been tracking exactly what our per year new unit rate would be. So we feel pretty good about using these numbers as a forecast, but it does, because it's so long range, it does account for those ups and downs a little bit. That's a good question.
Just a clarifying question, and feel free to answer later if it's part of your presentation anyway. This is slightly surprising, and it seems like it's a lot more evenly spread and perhaps east leaning than expected. So maybe if you can elaborate a little bit about the results, but if you're doing it later, that's fine.
I'm mostly looking at the change, talking about the change and the differences later. So if you want to talk about what's happening here, really what's happening here is we have a higher amount of vacant lots or vacant portions of lots in East Portland. And so when we're only allowing one unit in the inner neighborhoods, it really pushes some of that pressure out to East Portland and to North Portland and parts of West Portland and the West Hills as well. I use an analogy. I don't know if this is a good time, but I almost brought 2 glasses of water with me to do this. But really what we're talking about is we have a number of households that we're anticipating by 2035, the amount of water that is in this cup right here. And let's say my hand is a small cup. We fill this cup up, this small cup, and it starts to flow over the edges. And a little bit of what's happening in this current scenario is that that's flowing over. We have a smaller cup because we don't have a lot of capacity. We don't have a lot of land where that otherwise would happen. So it's spreading out to the different parts of the city, and it's spreading out to different parts of the region too. And the other part is, so when we increase potential capacity in areas where it's most likely that we'll see housing, it absorbs more of it. So less of it spills over. And that's also, we're working in this 20-year time frame, but that's really that pouring the water into the glass and watching it come over the edge of the glass for different sizes is really a little bit of what's happening here.
This baseline scenario, Tyler, though, correct me if I'm wrong, is something that was adopted with a comprehensive plan, and the single dwelling residential zones have, one unit per lot. And this is not a new finding for this project. It's just reminding the commission what was adopted with a comp plan and what would happen with a no change scenario.
Yeah. For those that remember the growth scenarios report from about 5 years ago, this is the single family portion of the growth scenarios report right here.
Right. We concentrated a lot on centers and corridors at that time because the single dwellings was only 20% of the growth allocation. But this is a reminder of what that distribution looks like.
So this would be, East Portland would be more induced because the indirect would be inner Portland from a growth, and then the induced would be out in East Portland because the market is taking advantage from that standpoint as you looked at the growth out there.
It could be both, yeah.
So you're talking about displacement now, not where growth
I'm just
would
saying
occur.
in terms of displacement, your indirect would be in inner Portland where the market is increasing due to market conditions. That would just be...
I think you're a couple of slides ahead of us.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. We're going to get that.
Yeah.
So the next thing I want to look is the change. So this is the residential infill proposals compared to the baseline. And I don't have a RIP one because the intensity of a pink map and going back and forth was kind of hard to read. So this is the change. This is the difference between the two. Anything that's a blue is a decrease in the amount of units that were expected under residential infill compared to the baseline. Anything that's that sort of emerald greeny, seafoam green color is is really similar to existing conditions. So the difference there is that when we do see those same amount of units, they are more likely to be in duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, and subsequently more likely to be smaller units. So that's what's happening in those sort of seafoam green areas. And then we do see a bit of an increase in the orange and the red areas as well. And there's a couple reasons why that's happening in the orange and the red areas specifically. Mostly we're looking at parts of North Portland and the peninsula, so parts of Portsmouth, University Park, St. John's, and a little bit in Cathedral Park, some parts of Cully, a lot of the neighborhoods that start to sort of transition to East Portland, or that East Portland edge in between 82nd and 205, and a little bit in Centennial and Palhurst Gilbert in East Portland as well. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that we've reduced the size of the structure that you can build. And the other is we've created different markets for different housing types because they're smaller. And those smaller units are less expensive. So before, when in East Portland there may not have been a market for a $700,000 single-family house, there is more likely to be a market for a $300,000 house in East Portland. So that's one dynamic that's happening. Another dynamic is it's shifting the development feasibility for the bigger ones. Because we're shrinking the scale, it's less likely that we'll see redevelopment or new units happening in more expensive neighborhoods as a result. So there's these sort of competing things that are happening that ultimately get us to this map. This is a very confusing one because we're looking at different scenarios and different changes. So I want to pause here and make sure that we can answer any questions before we move on.
When I saw this, one is it's a good reminder that there's displacement happening across this map. It's just that the lack of red doesn't mean it's not happening. It's just that this proposal makes it less bad than under current rules in much of the city, but not all the city. So for the areas where it is still reddish, where this would make it worse, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll without having intuitively, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I know in some, like in Foster, it's gentrifying right now. So this is just saying it would get worse under this.
So we haven't gotten to the displacement risk part. This is just
Okay.
new units, yeah. So we'll get to the displacement part.
that.
But you're right, yes. The less bad thing is a interesting finding from this.
Okay, I'll hold off.
Just in terms of what we just reviewed previously, so in terms of policy, what we're suggesting is that the policy of creating more units, the more units create less expensive units, cause those less expensive units to be built, not to be built in some of the more expensive areas, and cause them to be pushed out to the eastern side of Portland because they're less expensive out there and residents can move into those, I say family units. Is that a rough, that's the policy that we just reviewed, now applicable in what we're seeing in this change.
Sure.
That's right.
Is it even in the green?
The mic.
Even in the green sections, there's change to duplexes and triplexes, but
Yes.
the net loss, the net units are
Yeah.
zero. So it's as much, it's the economics of the land in part too. So where there's more margin in making that switch, you're going to see more of these units.
But if we didn't have, I guess I'm just looking at the housing policy, not displacement. But the housing policy makes it less likely to happen, let's say, inside of 80th and in that area because of just the market conditions of producing a fourplex, and it makes it more likely for that triplex or fourplex to occur outside because of the market, because you have lower value properties.
There is part of that that's happening for sure. And I
mean, not part, but it is causing more growth out there than, and accelerating in some areas because of that policy that we looked at previously. The housing policy.
The flip side of that is that in the baseline, most of the development that it's occurring is one for one, right?
Yeah.
A demo with one house. The benefits are also being, with the growth occurring in those areas that you're identifying, the red areas on the map, those areas will see more units produced.
We'll talk about
Triplex
who's
and
in
four.
those units later when we get to this,
Yeah.
the displacement study. But I just wanted to baseline, we are talking that policy causing
Shifts the growth.
Shifts the growth.
Shifts the growth.
Okay.
To it. Yeah.
Katie?
Yeah, I gotta ask about this map. Is that change between does this show the actual growth you're expecting, or does it show the difference between the actual growth you would expect here and the baseline?
The difference.
Okay, so do you have another slide that shows the actual? Because I think that's what when I first looked at this, I thought it was actual.
Yes, it's in the report. It's map 6 in the report.
This is the difference. So in other words, you don't lose 100 units in the blue.
Right.
You just don't get as many in the blue than you would if it was without the RIP. Is that right?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Correct. So the blue areas are losing units with residential infill that they would have had.
That they would have had, but they're not
in the
going to
baseline.
actually lose
Units from
actual
what's
units
built?
that are there already.
No.
That's
Yeah.
what it kind of looks like.
No.
Okay.
It's all based on a 20-year forecast. So can you go back to the previous one so this map shows where growth would go in the baseline. This is
Right.
map 5. Map 6 in the report, which we don't have up here, shows where growth would go with residential infill. It looks pink and a lot of data like this one. That's why it was difficult to show. And so the next map, which is map 7,
The difference
is the difference between the
Okay.
two, so you can see and you don't have to go back and forth and try to look up a census tract.
Okay.
That's how
thanks.
we were trying to communicate it.
That is, thanks.
Yeah.
So the next thing that we look into is that the specific displacement risk in the baseline scenario. And so to get to relating back to that original pink map, this is the impact really on low income renters in single family structures under the current comprehensive plan. One thing that's worth noting here is that there is already significant displacement risk of our existing standards, existing regulations in our single dwelling zones throughout the city. And so a little bit, we've been talking about this in terms of what the impact of residential infill proposal is. And as I continue to look through this stuff, I'm starting to realize a little bit of this is the impact of our current scenario and what the impact of that is. So we've made decisions over a long period of time to get to the point of where we are here, and we have, there's as Morgan said recently, there seems to be a relatively high cost of doing nothing in terms of impact to displacement across the city right now, and this demonstrates that is pretty much spread throughout Portland as well. So the next thing that we do is look at the residential infill project scenario. And this is not the difference, but this is the actual displacement risk under the proposals. And the proposal broadly decreases displacement risk across most parts of Portland. It decreases both areas at risk as well as the intensity of risk in some places. So some places get less intense for displacement risk, some neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods overall see a complete reduction in displacement risk. So there's an intensity and overall risk thing that's happening, sort of spatial component that's happening. And this is mostly due to one thing, is that we're more likely to see more units built under 2, 3, and 4 in the duplex, triplex, fourplex in less instances of redevelopment. And every less instance of redevelopment is a less likelihood of a low-income renter in a single-family house being displaced. And so that's a little bit of what's driving this big change, is that we're going from right now it's 1 for 1 or 1 for 2 or 1 to 1.5, whatever's happening, to 2, 3, 4 units allowed as you do 1. So there's this more units, less redevelopment that's really driving a lot of this, and specifically driving it in areas where we have higher shares of vulnerable households as well. I want to focus, I'm going to do a sort of quick drill down in comparison to East Portland specifically, because I think it's a really good example of some of the changes that we're seeing here between the scenarios. In the original baseline scenario, there's pretty significant displacement risk across East Portland, really clustered in the middle of East Portland there, between Powell and all the way up to Gleason and Halsey.
Can I ask, do you have like a number there? Because it's kind of hard to evaluate blocks of color on a map. So
Yes.
when you say less, I mean, I can see the
legend.
key, but I mean actual numbers.
So we don't feel as honestly as accurate when we start to get into the actual numbers at every single census tract. Again, we're trying to focus on trends and impacts of the proposal, but it is something we do look at it at
Well,
the
when
tract
you
level,
say that one is better than the other, it's hard to know that without actually seeing some numbers.
seeing the total. Okay, we can look into that and follow up with you.
You mean the numbers compared to the number of households in that census tract? Is that because those numbers on the left is
No.
not just a scale, right? Those are the number of low-income single-family renters in that census tract.
You have a block.
That would be.
Is there only 6 to 10 in that whole census block?
That's at risk. Low income. Yeah.
Okay, okay, but I didn't understand that. That's
Yes.
not a per mile or anything like that. That's the whole block.
That's the whole census tract, not the
Right.
block. Correct.
Well, I mean the whole block of color.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
You meant block.
No, I get it.
Street
I
block.
get it. Okay, I'm learning.
Yeah, so
But-
those are actual numbers. I was confused what we would return with.
Right.
What you don't have here is how many households are in that census tract, which I don't know how many households are in a census tract. So that
Yeah. There's a lot of numbers that we could aggregate to different levels, and we're really trying to stick at the impact of the policy and sort of broad trends and how these trends relate to the proposals. So you see a couple things happening here, specifically in East Portland. You see a reduction in the intensity of that orange color or that red color. And then you also see overall reduction. So if you look in that area up by Wilkes, that's 122nd east north of Halsey, that's a big reduction. You see significant reductions in parts of Centennial.
can you do?
Yep.
You want to use this?
Sure.
There you go. That might be
Thank
better.
you. Right here, you see less intensity in terms of impact in these areas here. Yes.
Can you put your mic on?
When it says displaced households, it's showing us the model's sort of forecast of change in loss of these households.
That's correct.
So
yes.
it's not the number that are in there; it's the number that are forced out.
That's correct.
That's why it's a little confusing. But
Yeah,
this
it was
this is the-
confusing. Now I'm kind of getting that burst of, oh, I think I'm
Yeah.
getting this. But is there a way to aggregate it somehow? Because there's, so if you were doing East Portland, I mean, you have these different census tracts. They have these different, you could take the mid number or something and just total them up. It's a little difficult to just look and gaze and get
those trends.
it could be, it could be really a big change in one and not in the others, and somehow it would be masked by just your eye, is what I'm
Correct.
saying.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we can look at what geographies would make sense to aggregate those up to. Perhaps the coalition boundaries or something that's kind of a larger geography might make sense. Yeah, that's a good recommendation. I think that would help communicate it with folks too. That's super helpful. And then ultimately, this is the change. So the change between the baseline and the residential infill proposal. What we've shown here on the map specifically is the increases. So the anything above 0. So we've got two categories, 0 to 5 and 6 to 25. Again, think of these in terms of just scale. Don't focus too much on the numbers. There are areas that say increased pressures, but the darker red areas are the ones that see more increase of those pressures. And so those are areas that we sort of would flag for a little bit of concern. East Montevilla, parts of the Montevilla neighborhood that are east of 82nd. The area in Lentz that's essentially in between 102nd and 82nd, and parts of Brentwood Darlington as well. And Brentwood Darlington's an interesting one because it doesn't raise up as a gentrification risk typology area, but it is an area that we likely are going to see some additional pressures there, displacement pressures there as well. One thing that's worth noting is anything that's not in orange or red on this map is in either stay the same or a decrease. So this isn't just there are some downward pressures as well across many neighborhoods, across many different parts of Portland. What we're really concerned with here, given our policies, our policy 5.15 and 5.16, is where there's a negative impact and identifying those and addressing those. And so that's why we're focusing in on the red areas here. So all of that tract level micro stuff really gets us to this, again, this big finding of net reduction across the city and specifically a net reduction in the displacement risk areas as well. Again, about a 28% reduction in the city as a whole and a 20% reduction in the displacement risk areas. So I think Eli's comment earlier about being less bad. This is a less bad scenario in terms of displacement on a citywide basis. We do have these localized concerns though around impacts, and so how do we talk about those and what do we do and what's the impact of this project, I think is kind of where we are now.
Well, can I use that as a invitation to make a question then for you? So you understand better than we do. Of course, I look at this and I think, okay, what can we do in those areas so this doesn't make it worse? And so I can imagine various policy levers, like you can't do 4 units there, or you don't get the bonus for doing this there, or you don't allow the alternative housing options there, but you haven't really modeled that because we were also capping size with this code update. So I'm just wondering from since you understand what's driving it, what would be some policy levers we might contemplate if we're going to do a little different rules for some part of the city to make that, not driving displacement?
Yeah, I think
worse than what we got today.
I think that we've got to think about it for a little bit, honestly, and work through it and talk to folks about what we think what the community sees as the right path forward in some of these areas. You're right that there's many different scenarios that we could potentially look at. I am a little bit worried that if we start tweaking things in these smaller areas, it's going to have unintended consequences in other areas. We've got, again, the glass of the water pouring it in, that's going to flow out to other areas too. And so depending on how we tweak those things and we model it, we may see similar or different impacts in other areas. And so I think that's a little bit of the concern about thinking about it in terms of the regulatory standpoint and the development standards and the zoning code, is that where are those unintended consequences going as a result of that? I think Sandra's going to talk a little bit more on the mitigation strategies. A lot of the comments that we heard during the comp plan on anti-displacement and these displacement policies in general were not to have specific tailored approaches, but to have citywide approaches and to support community organizations and nonprofit affordable housing providers to do the work that they do. And so I think we've just got to have some conversations, some more intense conversations, intentional conversations with our community partners on that.
I think to just tag on to that a little bit is, so our analysis has found that these 3 areas experience a greater pressure than other areas in the city, but I think we also shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there's existing displacement pressure under the baseline, but also under the proposal that may be less, but it's still there, and so we don't want to lose sight of the mitigation approaches for other parts of the city as well.
Yeah.
Jeff? Question. So this sort of confirms what the Johnson report confirmed, that allowing more units, smaller units, drives down the costs, creates more opportunity. Kind of the analysis seems to confirm the theory we were after with RIP. I'm wondering why there's a few pockets, Lentz and a couple of areas that are in red that don't seem to be getting the same benefit the rest of the east side is getting. Is there some anomaly in the analysis? Is there something going on in those specific areas why wouldn't they get the same benefit everyone else on the east side is getting in terms of, gee, we'll have more units, they'll be smaller, they'll be less expensive?
I think that these areas are getting some of those benefits. What's happening is that we have a higher share of vulnerable households in these neighborhoods. So we have more low-income renters in single-family structures. We have more renters overall. We have more households of color. So it's not necessarily that they're not seeing the benefits, it's that there's more folks that are potentially, more households that are potentially impacted in different ways.
But why would that be different from the baseline? That's the part I've not understood. I mean, under today's conditions, those households are in those neighborhoods, they're being displaced. What's the difference between the baseline and RIP in that?
This gets to that change part of the size and units and how the market responds to it. I think to the question in the modeling is, we're doing the best job that we can with the information that we can of getting a sense of this stuff, and there's always going to be some funkiness that happens. I do think, knowing and hearing what's happening in a lot of these communities, that there are significant displacement pressures that are happening. And just because, even if they didn't show up on a map, doesn't mean that that's not happening. And so I think that there's a reality and a lived experience thing that we also need to elevate as part of this discussion too, is that there's lots of things we could do from a methodology perspective, but the fact is that folks on the ground are feeling pressures right now. And those are areas that when I look at in any different iteration of this, are always flagged as issues looking forward.
Also, the analysis was focused mostly on the burden side, right? So it's looking at the impacts on specific households that are being displaced for redevelopment. We didn't have a good way to evaluate specifically, I guess, to Andre's question about who's benefiting and who's moving into these units. So our economic analysis shows the units are less expensive, hitting that 80% MFI. When we're talking about displaced households, it starts at 80% and goes down from there. So there are benefits in terms of additional housing options that get opened up. This doesn't really look at that side of the equation directly. But there is still an imbalance, I think, in some of the households that get displaced aren't going to move into one of these shiny new fourplex units.
Daisy?
Hi. I have a question about, have you looked at what land values or land costs per parcel or lot would be baseline and then versus residential infill project? And I ask this because, and second part of the question, have you looked at what upzoning does to land cost in other cities? And I ask this because I recently read some research coming out of MIT that looks at upzoning in Chicago. And essentially it found that land costs and housing prices went up in areas that were upzoned. And there wasn't a significant increase in construction either. Housing construction.
So there's
the Yonah Freemark work?
Yeah, the Yonah Freemark one. I've read that as well. I think with this project, we have to think about really what the regulations are and what we're proposing. I don't think it's a straight up though. There's some up and there's some down. And so the comparison of this to, say, changing from a single dwelling zone to a CM2 or a CM3 is very different. And a lot of the research around upzoning and impact on land values is around significantly more building area, significantly more height, significantly more number of units. In this case, we're talking about up to 3 more units in a smaller building. So it's an increase in the number of units. It's a decrease in the amount of total square footage. So there's, I don't think it's as comparable to as we think about upzoning overall. But we have looked at the land values, and how that relates to the development types is what's driving a lot of this too. And so it is a component of what we're looking at. It's one of the main inputs into what Johnson Economics' work, or Jerry Johnson's work, looked at. But it is that land value component is accounted for in this work.
And I need to go back and reread the Chicago study myself, but one finding or critique of it that leapt out at me was in Chicago. I think if I want to look at it again, but I think it illustrates this, that whereas they upzoned in some places, they didn't expand the cup in the same way that Tyler's talking about. The approach that you all, the commission, have put on the table here is broad and spreading this out. And in Chicago, each of the 50 different wards have separate aldermen, and they call all the zoning. So how the zoning happens is very political and related to power. And so it looks like it's expanded, but it's only expanded in a few places because the rest of them are kind of shut down because they have the power to do that, to not allow more units. So it pushes more of it over to the places that do allow it, or didn't stop it. Really, it's not even so much allowing it. I think one of the things I think I'm seeing in this too is the places that are lighting up on our displacement risk, and you see the same sort of pattern in the baseline, are those parts, those neighborhoods where there's a concentration of economically vulnerable households with vulnerable to displacement, and the land values are such that redevelopment for additional units hits a reachable rent that's higher than might be reachable elsewhere compared to the land cost. So it's really the land value redevelopment sweet spot as well, and it's hitting a neighborhood where you already have a concentration of those vulnerable households, I think that's what's lighting up these areas. Why it's different between the baseline and RIP, or why it's the same in those areas, is something I just need to think about more. But it's the combination of those two factors.
Daisy, any last questions before you have to leave? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I got a ton, but first, has the mayor seen this?
The mayor?
Displacement, the mayor?
We have not presented it to the mayor.
Okay.
Yeah. You're our first audience.
Great. Page 47 of the residential infill project has an equity lens. Are those numbers still good? The differences?
Oh, you're in volume 1?
Yeah, volume 1 at the bottom.
Morgan will tell you.
Yeah, so this relates to our proposed rezones of the R2.5, R5 historically narrow lots, and that part of the proposal hasn't changed. So
It's still good. Yep. So I'm going to start with people and go back to what we saw. If you go back to the areas that were most vulnerable there. What this means is that African Americans are going to lose about 11%, Hispanics 20% of their population. If you look at the difference, it's about 20% between the 9.54 and 7.61. That's about a 20% reduction.
I'm not totally,
if I'm understanding
not totally
this,
following.
Citywide, we're 9 point, and then the rezones, it's 7.6. So are you saying that it reduces that much?
I don't know.
That's what I'm asking.
So what this
Page
table
47.
on page 47 shows is where we're proposing to rezone. Actually, maybe flip back to the.
Oh, the R2.5 rezoning.
It's a slightly different proposal, and what we were trying to do is just get an understanding of the ethnic makeup, the racial makeup of these proposed rezone areas in proportion or relation to the citywide diversity. So in the areas that are purple on this map, where we're proposing to rezone from R5 to R2.5, this just shows the demographic makeup of those areas in relation to how the city demographics lay out. So it's not showing a change. This isn't about change. This is about.
But it gets to a point, if you go back to the displacement, if you look at those zones, they're high minority areas. And that is the point of, in East Portland, Cully, in the east side of Portland, out to the other areas. If you looked at a map of minorities in Portland and overlaid it on here, I suspect the areas that were high red would also be very high populations of minorities. that were high risk of displacement above the normal. So two slides ahead.
Yeah. So this map right here that we're looking at is a map of households of color in
So
single-family
when you
residential.
flip it to the displacement, that one back. Go for it. One more.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you look at that one and you look at the minorities, they overlay very well. And my issue is we are displacing minorities and they can't come back in because there is even though we're creating more housing through RIP, the housing is not affordable to them because of their income levels. And I don't know, you're talking about Hispanics, African Americans stuff. They're not at 80%. You look at the city just did a report in 2017 talking about African Americans having the lowest of income levels. And so when you displace them, how do they even come back? They can't come back. I mean, you're asking me as an African American to approve displacing African Americans that can't come back. I get redlining. Redlining was I couldn't live in Portland in this section of town, and I could live across the tracks. Now I can't even live in Portland anymore. I just can't approve that. I can't, in all consciousness, say that people in the city of color are not going to be able to live in certain parts of the city and are going to be displaced, and they can't even come back to the city unless there's just not a market for them.
So, Andre, I take your point, but isn't the relevant question whether we're displacing those people at a lower rate than we are in the baseline scenario?
In those areas, no. You're not. You're accelerating the rate in those areas. And my concern is the induced populations, because we're moving people that are in the indirect path. We're moving it out to where people have an opportunity today in a single family home to either rent or own, and now of color, and now we're taking that opportunity away because
we're building the fourplex where they live.
Building a fourplex where they live.
I want to poke at the numbers. I mean, are we actually accelerating, or are we just decelerating less in those neighborhoods?
We're accelerating in the red areas, unless I missed the presentation.
I would like to see that overlay you're describing, where we see
accelerating these red areas.
Yes.
Yes, this is the change map.
Just anecdotal from where I'm in the Coley neighborhood. It's a pretty diverse neighborhood. It's seeing decreased displacement risk compared to the baseline. I don't intuitively know why we're seeing a different. What's happening there is showing a decreasing the displacement risk, versus Lens also gentrifying under today's, baseline, showing RIP increasing. I don't know why they're different, but they both include are more diverse parts of the city than the close-in neighborhoods. So I guess I think it would be helpful to see those two graphs overlaid somehow, the one showing the racial distribution in the city and the areas that are negatively impacted have higher displacement under RIP than they would under the baseline, and just seeing how those compare to each other, because it's not ringing intuitively to me, and that would, because I think some areas it's going to help, some it's going to hurt compared to the baseline, and I can't quite see that with what we have yet.
It's the same thing that I was talking about, only more personal, because it's a little hard sometimes to tell where they line up,
And if I can offer, I think you're pointing at something else out, Andre, and I know when Commissioner Oswald was here, he and I had talked about it, is like what are we trying to measure for displacement? Is it the person who's living in a single family house right now and is going to be displaced, and that house is going to be demolished and rebuilt? Or is it, what kind of units are we creating with these 4 units that this person can move back into the neighborhood or can find a spot in the neighborhood to live in? And those are 2 different things, because there's a temporal aspect to this, and this report measures the first. It measures I'm in a house, I'm a renter, and I'm being displaced for some opportunity for the upzoning, quote opportunity. Not the benefits that Morgan was talking about of how many units will be created at this 80 to 120 MFI that provide opportunity. And what you're bringing up is that most Latinos and African Americans aren't at 80% MFI, so therefore there is no opportunity to move back into those communities.
Yeah, and
with this proposal, there's also, of course, IH. So this isn't in a vacuum. This project
it is, though, because IH is already paid for, in a sense. We've done a bond measure at 600,000, 300,000 in housing bonds. We've spent a lot of money already to try to create affordable housing in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Now in these areas, this is up and above what I think at that time was projected to be. I don't know, but it seems like we're making the problem worse for some populations, and for other populations, it seems like it's a good deal. And I'm concerned about the unbalancing of that issue. I really worry that we're being asked to displace certain populations faster than others for the benefit of this greater good. And the greater good of more units is not benefiting everybody equally. And I don't know, I know the comp plan policies, and it's just not in there that we create policy to create unequal benefits to.
Correct.
And so I'm not sure how we balance it, but what's there today, moving these units out to East Portland is, to me, not the answer. In terms of saying what Tyler talked about, saying, well, this glass is full, so it has to flow, and it flows to East Portland with fourplexes and triplexes and whatever, is not an answer, because it affects people that are at the most vulnerable level.
But I think we should try to come back with some way of numbers that help us compare the impact. I'm not on households of color baseline compared to RIP, just looking at the distribution of households total over the whole package, because some are making out better, some are making out are in more impacted areas. I'm not sure that that's really possible, but that's the I think, to what Eli was saying, would help us see really what's going on here in terms of particular impacts of households of color. I'm not quite sure it's
I think that
clear.
I think that an overlay map might help with that. Just show those two maps overlay each other and have one showing hatching for one variable and colors for the other variable to see to overlay racial diversity versus those who are helped or hindered by the RIP compared to baseline. But I think that Sandra's making a good point on the benefit side of this, is that, and to what you were saying, Andre, where do people end up? Under the current scenario, where in many of these situations we're doing one-for-one large home replacements, that's less of an area to go back to. Like it's harder on the benefit side. If we're creating more smaller units, then you have more of an opportunity regardless of your race. If there's placement, there's more place to live back in the city if we have more smaller units to pick from. Does that make sense?
I just, two things. I know race is a hard thing to talk about, and we're talking about people of color, and it's hard. But keep in mind, it would be good to look at income levels of populations of color. Mm-hmm. So we can understand when you say come back into the neighborhood, that a population that has an average income of $30,000 is not going to come back into a fourplex.
Mm-hmm. I guess all I'm saying is that they're not going to come back into a big house. It's even less likely to come back to a big house. That's all. I'm not trying to disagree that it's hard to get back to your neighborhood. I'm just saying, how does it compare with what we have on the ground? What do we have in our zoning code today? And right now in our zoning code, and this has been happening for decades, some of the closer neighborhoods have been redeveloped with one-for-one replacements of large homes. That's even harder to get back into than if they're replaced with some little plexes.
Okay, let's get some perspectives from Katie and then Teresa.
Well, I just want to say that, I mean, I think the next section you guys were going to talk about was mitigation. And so I'm really interested in hearing that. I don't know if we're going to do that today, but I mean, I know what you're saying. And I think that if the city doesn't put in place robust mitigation, then history will repeat itself. The same thing will happen in East Portland that happened perhaps a little slower, but that happened in inner Northeast. And so I think that's not something that I think this group we can't put in place. We don't have funding authority. But I mean, I'm going to really be pushing for us to take a very strong stand on that. And I just want to hear more about what you had in mind. And it's also one of the reasons why I'm asking for a new plan for East Portland, because it really needs to look at equity and get ahead of something like RIP, so that people that want to redevelop their place don't have to sell it to do that, and also look at all those different levels of people and different situations that they're in. They're all different, and provide a way to keep them in the neighborhood. East Portland EPAP is starting to talk about something. It has to do with the schools, of where trying to figure out some kind of a way to give people who live in East Portland kind of a first up in terms of new housing to keep them in East Portland, so that we don't, and it's partly because kids really suffer when they have to keep jumping from school to school. They really suffer. So there's some things that are going on, but without the city's support on these things, it'll just be another apology 20 years from now or 10 years from now.
Hey, Teresa, you're going to get your turn. I just want to do a time check. Are people okay with staying a few more minutes to keep discussing this? Okay, Teresa.
Okay, I have just a technical question on the charts. So the changes, is it 100% of what could redevelop is what's in the changes, or did you factor it in with the Johnson Economics sort of uptake model?
It's a little bit less in terms of overall impact than what Jerry at Johnson Economics looked at, because we're working within our Metro Forecast Control total. And so we have a more sort of restricted total amount of households that we're looking at over the 20-year period. It's similar in terms of the number, and the outcomes are similar, so we feel pretty good about the results, and they line up well with his work. But our requirements for our Metro Functional Plan and our statewide planning goals, we're working with this 123,000 households. So similar, a little bit different, but in line with also, yeah.
Okay, you want to talk a little more about mitigation strategies?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So the second part of the report is mitigation strategies, and we basically did some literature search, and sorry, lost my train of thought. As Tyler was talking in the displacement risk analysis, because residential infill project affects single-family residential zones, for the project we were particularly concerned with addressing the needs of low-income renters and low-income homeowners in single-family residential houses. So the list, what we put together for part 2 was basically a compilation of potential strategies to mitigate for displacement among vulnerable residents in those single-family residential areas. It builds upon the work that Dr. Bates did in the study that we mentioned, and includes also new ideas that you heard in testimony from nonprofit providers and anti-displacement advocates and housing advocates. They're generally grouped into what strategies we could have for low-income renters to avoid displacement in the first place, and then also strategies for low-income homeowners. For renters, there's a lot of educational opportunities that are shown in the report for tenants' rights and financial literacy and understanding lease agreements and relocation assistance. For financial assistance, as you know, that when you're signing a lease, you need to put a deposit. There's application fees, so there's examples of that also. For the low-income homeowners, there's ideas about education so that especially education about this project in particular and what the potential development opportunities are, because sometimes low-income homeowners are there's predatory practices from developers who want to develop those properties, and the homeowners might not understand or know what type of development or what their land is worth. So there's some examples of other financial assistance and technical assistance to help people take advantage of the benefits that this proposal would allow them to do. Like, how do you build an ADU? What's the technical assistance? It costs a lot of money. How do they get assistance to provide to build those units? In general, I think we feel that this section of the report is really a beginning of a conversation. To get to your point, unfortunately, it's the beginning of a conversation between the city and the Housing Bureau and community organizations. I know I certainly don't feel like I have the expertise to say this is the best mitigation strategy of all the mitigation strategies, the tried and true system that you would put in place or program that you would put in place. So we don't have a recommendation or proposal for you to adopt today. We wanted to bring forward these strategies because you had heard about them through the testimony and through some of the literature search that we did. I don't think there's an easy answer. We're not asking the commission at this point to identify which is the most effective of these strategies. We don't have the information to provide you about that. The way I envision this working is that the commission, with the voice of the commission, can bring this to city council's attention to when we get to city council, and bring it to their attention about the importance of this issue, about funding programs, of having a strategy around anti-displacement work.
So is staff not actively considering any strategies that would change the entitlements in the most vulnerable areas? So say, take 0.1 off the set of FAR bonuses, so or maybe you only get to a triplex instead of a fourplex, or are we looking at targeting those areas geographically with different development rights as a mitigation?
We felt that our charge coming here today, because you had such extensive discussions about this proposal, was to bring forward your proposal so that the revised proposed draft really encapsulated what you gave us direction to do. And to be honest, we finished the displacement risk analysis a week and a half ago. And by that time, we had all the code written and all the maps done. I just feel like we wanted to get it in front and to the public discord.
Certainly appreciate that. So in the future sessions we're setting up, will we have specific time set aside to discuss mitigation strategies that we might include in the package?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Other thoughts, questions? Andre?
I just want to thank you for the displacement. I do disparity studies, and it was a good analysis. The conclusions are what they are, and we can all interpret them, but it was good work. And so I appreciate that because I think it does start to expose this middle housing strategy, and to me, some of the impacts, the unintended impacts on communities. And so looking at, as you think about mitigation strategies or changes to this RIP or anything, it's something just to use as a basis. And I appreciate that as we start to make decisions.
Okay. Katie?
Well, I just hope that you bring up cost when you're talking about mitigation strategies, because I think if we're asking City Council to do something, we need to kind of start to clue. I think it's going to cost a lot. Usually, good work does, and so it'd be nice to, give them the sticker shock early, and maybe, I don't know. I don't know which way it works.
I've seen, the Housing Bureau can share, it's huge sticker shock, what it would take to address the affordable housing shortage. And the gap between what someone can afford to pay and what the market can create it only grows when the market rate stuff gets more expensive, because what you can afford to pay doesn't really go up very much. But if you have, so I guess I know that even if these guys don't have it on the, off the cuff,
Right.
that the Housing Authority, the Portland Housing Bureau do have those numbers, and they're scary.
Yeah. And but I think there are some things that some of the things around the information. I've had conversation with Anita Yap and talking about maybe there should be a one-stop shopping place where low-income people could go and find out what their options are in terms of how to redevelop their own property, those kinds of things. And I that's not subsidizing really, their building, but then there should be opportunities when they go to that one-stop shopping place to be able to find, is there a place for me to get a low-cost loan? And that's something that's the city could be working on to set something like that up. Anyway, I'd love to see something like that happen.
Jeff?
I echo Andre. It really helped to bring an analytical framework to this whole displacement issue. I think what I think is important going forward on RIP is that it doesn't sound like we're going to be presented with mitigation options specific to RIP. We're not going to be presented with here's potential changes to RIP to help deal with some of these displacement concerns. So I think it's important that we not mix the two. Because I think the fundamental conclusion is RIP is not a significant creator of more displacement. I know Andre's concerned with some potential, I'll call them marginal, I don't mean to, the minority piece of this is, maybe there's a few tweaks where RIP's having a small impact on displacement, but overall, there's a displacement problem and RIP does not contribute to it. You can make the case overall, it may help it, but whether you interpret the data to say it's got some negative impacts to me, it's a very secondary, tertiary aspect of RIP. And I would hate to see us create the impression as we finally take this large, important, somewhat controversial piece of work called RIP up to City Council, we don't create the impression, and by the way, one more aspect of RIP is it's going to exacerbate displacement problems, because I don't believe it will. And so I would hope we could separate the two and not. I think the idea of the Planning Commission and staff thinking hard about mitigation strategies in any form is a good idea. I don't see them as part of RIP. I don't think they need to be a specific proposal, budget, programs as part of RIP. I think RIP is a different issue because it's not creating.
Okay, so Joe, then Teresa, then Eli, then Ben.
So just real quick, the analysis has given us information that we can use to try to tease out the question that Andre has put on the table, which is there already, can we see a differential, a sort of a structurally differential impact on African American households or households of color? So we could try to tease that out, because remember, our baseline proposal from the comprehensive plan has these kind of displacement powers and impacts just in it already too. So this is the difference between the two, and our comprehensive plan and our housing programs have sort of policies and would-be programs in there to try to make help households navigate that existing displacement pressure. Maybe there's something that's more place-based, specific to the places where we think it's going to have impact, that we could design for RIP that might help us see a move like that.
Teresa.
Well, actually, I'm going to echo what Joe just said, because I think what the maps do for us is it helps us target areas where we should look at for programs. So whatever the programs are, but it's like, okay, we're going to do something that's going to exacerbate stuff in this area. So let's like go to that area and try to apply this stuff. So I do think it does have use in it. Yeah.
Eli?
I think that let's see. I think I'm going to disagree a little bit with Jeff. I think that RIP does. I think what we've experienced with this analysis you've done is revealing what there's studies all over the country showing is that single-family traditional zoning with minimum lot sizes drives displacement. That's what cities do all over the country. We've been doing it here in Portland for decades, and RIP pulls that back a little bit. It is changing traditional single-family minimum lot zoning, which I think is, and your data shows, is culpable in a lot of displacement. It's sort of like with the metaphor of the glass. It's like you have the glass water and you put a screen over it so you can't get any more water into it. I mean, so things go out. I mean, that's what single-family zoning does. It's been studied all over the country like this: white picket zoning, exclusionary zoning, whatever you call it. And RIP doesn't totally change it, but it pokes some holes in it, pretty big ones. And in that way, it's removing a situation which is, you see not just in Portland but all over the place, that has driven some awful displacement. And it doesn't get rid of it entirely, and your analysis sort of hones in on the areas where it might not. But I think that's mostly what we're seeing with this analysis, is that the status quo really sucks if you're a vulnerable resident. And this changes the status quo.
Ben, you get the last word.
Wow. No pressure there.
Make it profound.
Well, in a way, just to answer Eli, I in principle I agree with that general idea that going from a single family, locking in 46% or whatever that is of the land mass of the city as a single family, that does have those consequences. So in general, I agree. I do. Well, thank you for carrying out this analysis, and thank you for the great conversation. I think that Andre sparked, and I think it really opens my eyes on this. I'm still struggling with understanding what these actually mean, and I'm wondering if there's just one, perhaps hopefully small piece that you can do of analysis you can do for us. As I'm looking at this map 11 in particular, if I add up the households, just roughly, we're talking maybe a couple hundred, 200-ish, which 200 too many probably. I'd like to understand how, just to put it more in perspective and kind of get a little bit more of a sense of the magnitude of the effect of what we're talking about, if we relate that to the overall number of the displacement, the number of households that are in the displacement risk area. Mm-hmm. I guess it's not going to give us, the definite answer. It just like to put that a little bit more in perspective.
Okay.
And since we're at it, maybe not one other request to staff, since I get to do the last word this time. I'd like to ask your perspective about, perhaps, does this inform the overlay map that tells us where this applies or not? In other words, should we consider these areas or some of these areas to be pulled out of the overall overlay?
I think this gets to the question that Eli was asking, was what are the policy levers we can change? And to the response that Tyler had, which was, you change one thing here, it changes the displacement risk, and we could keep chasing this. We call it like the whack-a-mole problem a little bit. And like I said, we just finished the displacement risk analysis last week, so we're still trying to wrap our head around, are there levers that we would want to put from a policy perspective, and then the mitigation strategies too. I think we have more work to do in both of those areas.
So I'll offer a different analogy rather than whack-a-mole. So, I kind of think of this as a flood control project, and we've got, a topology we're working in that, has different vulnerability levels or kind of the landscape. And if we're building our flood control projects and we're just a little smarter about where we put some of the channels, can we even out the benefits so it's more uniform than it is today. So I don't know if that analogy helps or not, but I'll throw it out there. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time today.
One more reminder for the commission. I put up a slide for the next steps. Tuesday, February 19th, we would appreciate your ideas for possible amendments on the work that Morgan presented today. I know we already have one on there, which was the 250 square foot addition for existing houses. So we'll put that on the list. I think Commissioner Schultz has another amendment, so we have two. But if you have other topics, you don't have to have the full amendment language, but if you're thinking, I'm not comfortable with this or I want to change that, please let us know by Tuesday, and then we'll put things together for another worksheet for your work session on February 26th, and then after that we will you'll have a discussion there and we can prepare actual amendments for your vote on March 12th. So that's what we're thinking.
Just I'm concerned because we just had the displacement. There's a conversation about this overflow into the moving into other neighborhoods. We're going to do some more analysis, and we're already rushing to amendments. And it's like, well, we had the disparity. We checked the box. Let's move on. And I'm concerned we're checking the box, and we're not going to see if there's really policy changes we need to make to RIP. And I don't agree with Jeff in that if there's none that we really don't want to, and we've done that, great, but we just don't check the box and run off and said we did the displacement. Yes. And we're going to move forward. And this seems to just be the train's left the station.
I can see how that would feel this way. I can see how that would feel this way. I guess I feel like we've given you a lot of information. I'd like us all to digest this a little more and think and brainstorm through, and we can keep talking certainly by the 19th. If that, we could put a big placeholder on there of continue to talk about this before we even talk about amendments, and we'll see where we go from this. But this was our tentative thinking before we came in today.
Okay. Thank you to staff. Thank you to the commission. Appreciate the hard work this afternoon.
Thank you.